No Vacancy for Trouble by Wynn Valentine. Copyright 2026 by Wynn Valentine. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without written permission from the author, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. This audiobook is narrated using an AI-generated voice. Chapter 1. Ashworth House had 11 guest rooms, 3 active leaks, and a front door swollen so firmly into its frame that the estate had, for the moment, inherited Meg rather than the reverse. She stood beneath the porch roof while rain stitched the gravel drive to the lake. The key Sylvia's lawyer had sent fit the lock. It turned with a clean, encouraging click. The door itself declined further participation. Meg tried her shoulder once, because dignity permitted one attempt. The wood gave a low complaint and held. "If you break it, the estate gets to buy itself a new door," said a woman behind her. Meg turned. The woman coming up the steps was tall, perhaps 30, with olive-brown skin, black hair clipped bluntly at her nape, and a cardboard file box protected beneath a transparent rain cape. She regarded the blocked entrance without surprise. "Rena Chouinard?" Meg asked. "For the next 3 days." Rena put the box under cover. "After that, I revert to a person with better boundaries." Sylvia's attorney had called her an inventory specialist. Meg had pictured a retired auctioneer with a clipboard, not someone young enough to deliver a rebuke before introductions were complete. Margaret Ashworth. Meg? Margaret on legal documents. Meg when no one is billing by the hour. Rena considered that, apparently found it usable, and bent to examine the bottom of the door. "It has dropped on the hinges. Pushing makes it worse." Meg looked at the key still in her hand. Conrad's brass watch pressed cool against her wrist, 2 minutes ahead as always. She had kept it that way after the funeral. Correcting it had felt both trivial and disloyal, which was an unreasonable amount of significance for a watch to carry. "There's a service entrance," she said, "left side beyond the kitchen garden. You remember the property?" "I remember being 23 and angry in several locations." That earned the smallest change in Rena's face. Not a smile. An acknowledgement that a line had been correctly assembled. They followed the porch around the house. The lake appeared between bare maple branches, gray water beneath a gray sky. Meg had expected the view to accuse her of staying away. Instead, it was occupied with weather. The service door looked worse than the front. Its paint had blistered into pale green scales, and the iron latch sagged. Rena set one hand beneath the handle and lifted before she turned it. The door opened. Warm, stale air moved out of the passage, carrying dust, old varnish, and the mineral smell of a radiator that had recently remembered its job. Somewhere inside, a pipe knocked twice. Meg had spent 4 years learning the difference between waiting and being helpless. The distinction remained useful, if not especially comforting. She stepped across the threshold. The service passage was narrower than she remembered. The linen room door stood open, beneath a sign whose gold letters had faded to Andre. On the right, a sheet of plywood covered the old service elevator. Straight ahead, the corridor widened into the kitchen, where metal pans hung above a work table and 3 blue buckets waited beneath 3 separate leaks. Each bucket had been labeled in black marker: North Pipe, Chimney Flashing, Undecided. Meg stared at the last one. "Your aunt had a system," Rena said. Sylvia believed naming a problem was the less expensive half of solving it. Was she right? Only if you ignored the second half. Rena took off her rain cape, shook it once over the slate floor, and folded it into a precise square. Beneath it, she wore black trousers and a navy sweater with reinforced elbows. She set the file box on the kitchen table and removed a tablet, a measuring tape, 3 pencils, and a roll of red inventory dots. "Before we start," she said, "I need to know what result you want." "A list. That's a deliverable, not a result." Meg took off Conrad's green shore jacket and hung it over the back of a chair. The right cuff was frayed where his watch had rubbed it. She had found the jacket in the hall closet after the funeral, still holding a receipt for cough drops and a parking stub from the clinic. She had thrown those away and kept the jacket, which seemed inconsistent until she stopped requiring Grief to submit an expense report. "I want to know what can be sold with the property, what has family value, and what needs disposal," she said. "The attorney says the inn's furnishings may affect the offers." "Offers plural?" 2 expressions of interest, 1 actual offer. And the building? A consultant is coming tomorrow. Rena tapped the tablet awake. So you intend to sell? It was not a question, which made Meg want to answer it. I intend to make an informed decision. That's a meeting sentence. I have attended a great many meetings. I could tell. Rena's expression did not change, but Meg suspected she had been categorized. She found that less offensive than it should have been. Before they left the kitchen, Meg opened the envelope Sylvia's attorney had instructed her not to read until she stood inside the inn. The condition had annoyed her on principle. The envelope had occupied the passenger seat for 4 hours from Boston, cream paper behaving as if it possessed authority independent of probate law. Sylvia's handwriting filled one side of a sheet torn from an old reservation book. Meg, stay 30 days before you sell, not because the inn deserves saving. Buildings do not deserve things. Stay because everyone who wants it has already decided what it is worth to them, and you should have the same opportunity. After 30 days, choose quickly and live with the choice slowly. The boiler lies about Zone 2. Lift the service handles before turning them. Bernadette has my blue account book, whether she admits it or not. Sylvia. Rena waited without pretending not to read Meg's face. Family reason? She asked. Family instruction. Different color? Black, apparently. Meg folded the page along its existing crease. Sylvia had managed to make a request sound like both freedom and a trap. 30 days was not long. It was also longer than Meg had spent anywhere without Conrad in 26 years, except hospitals that did not count as places so much as suspended conditions. Rena opened a new project on her tablet. Then our inventory needs an operating category. The inn is closed. Closed is current condition. Operating category asks what could work again. I am not reopening it. Then the category will support the sale. Same observations, different decision. They began with the kitchen because it contained the highest concentration of things Sylvia had considered too useful to discard. Copper pans hung above the work table in descending size, each blackened on the bottom and polished where hands had lifted it. A commercial range occupied one wall beside a domestic refrigerator held shut with painter's tape. Rena placed green dots on equipment fitted to the room, yellow on items requiring valuation, and red on anything unsafe to move without inspection. The walk-in pantry contained 63 empty preserving jars, 9 bags of salt hardened into masonry, 3 boxes of Guess soaps, and a label on one shelf that read, "For people who say they aren't hungry." Meg touched the label with one finger. When she was 15, Sylvia had kept cheese, apples, and slices of dense brown bread there. During the summer, Meg's mother left Meg's father for the first time. Nobody at the inn had discussed the separation. Sylvia had merely found reasons for Meg to carry trays, count towels, and eat when eating could be made to look like work. It had been kindness. It had also been Sylvia's preferred form of silence. Keep the label? Rena asked. Meg withdrew her hand. Photograph it. The shelf stays with the building. The dining room came next. 24 chairs had been stacked upside down on 6 tables, making the room look as if it had surrendered to a wooden insect. Lake-facing windows rose nearly from floor to ceiling. The lower sash on the center window had slipped half an inch, and rain had darkened the sill beneath it. Rena photographed the damage, measured it, and added a line to the operating list. No guests until the egress windows open, close, and lock, she said. The building consultant decides that. The building consultant makes it official. My ankles have already issued a preliminary opinion. In the parlor, rolled carpets exposed pale rectangles on the floor. A piano stood beneath a canvas cover. Meg lifted one corner and found 3 keys marked with pencil initials, M, B, and S. Meg, Bernadette, Sylvia. The sight of the letters made the room feel crowded with people who were gone, estranged, or both. Piano? Rena asked. Built for the room. You learned fast. I had an exacting teacher. Meg let the canvas fall before Rena could ask which one. They reached the lobby last. It waited beyond the parlor's double pocket doors, larger than Meg remembered and less grand. The slate floor had been patched in 2 incompatible shades. The stone fireplace showed a soot fan above the mantel. A long chestnut desk faced the entrance, its surface bare except for a brass bell with a dent near the base. Rena photographed the room from each corner. Desk stays, Meg said, because built for the space. Good. Physical reason. Rena added a green dot to its underside. Does family reason get a different color? Family reason gets a conversation after lunch, when blood sugar is less likely to make decisions. Meg walked behind the desk. She had stood there one summer when Sylvia was upstairs with a guest who had broken an ankle. 23-year-old Meg had answered the phone, checked in a family from Quebec, and spent the next hour furious that Sylvia had trusted her with the work, but not the explanation. The brass bell had hung a clear note through the lobby then. Meg pressed it now. The sound was slightly sharp and unexpectedly alive. From somewhere beyond the west wall came a thump. Rena lowered her tablet. They listened. A second thump followed, softer than the first. Then a scrape. Heating? Meg asked. Not unless the heating system is moving furniture. The west side of the inn had been closed before Sylvia died. A yellow municipal notice covered the door beside the main stair. No entry, pending structural review. The paper was unbroken. The tape along its top edge had curled but held. Rena took a photograph without approaching. Could someone be inside from an exterior entrance? She asked. The west porch door was nailed shut years ago. Another scrape traveled through the wall. Meg's phone rang in her coat pocket, sharp enough that both women startled. The display showed an unfamiliar New York number. She answered without taking her eyes from the sealed door. Margaret Ashworth. Ms. Ashworth, Celeste Rusk. We exchanged emails about Northmark's proposal. The voice was low, brisk, and warm in the practiced way of someone who knew warmth reduced call duration. I wanted to let you know our acquisition committee has approved the cash terms. We can hold them through Friday. Friday was 4 days away. I haven't received the structural report, which is precisely why our as-is position protects you. No repair exposure, no prolonged estate administration, no uncertainty. Beyond the sealed door, something struck wood once. Rena silently pointed toward the front window. A dark figure moved past the rain-blurred glass toward the porch. Ms. Ashworth? Celeste said. Can I send the final package for signature? The front doorknob turned, the swollen door held against whoever stood outside. Meg looked at the yellow notice, the figure behind the glass, and the dented brass bell beneath her hand. Send it, she said. I won't sign anything until the inventory and inspection are complete. She ended the call as a man's face appeared at the window beside the door. He wore tortoiseshell safety glasses and an orange rain shell. He pointed toward the latch, then made a lifting motion. Meg crossed the lobby and raised the handle as she pulled. The door opened immediately. The man stepped inside with rain shining on his shaved head. Dorian Pritchard, building consultant. He glanced at the phone in Meg's hand, then at the yellow notice. And before you ask, I did not make the noise in the west wing. Behind him, from the closed side of the inn, came one final, deliberate knock. Chapter 2. Dorian Pritchard did not investigate unexplained noises. He documented them. He set a hard black case on the lobby desk, removed a small recorder, and stated the date, time, weather, and exact location while rain ticked against the windows. Audible impact from the west wing, he said. 3 events observed by Ashworth and Chouinard before my entry. 1 event observed by all 3 parties. Restricted access notice intact on interior door. He stopped the recording. Now, he said, we call the police if we believe a person is in danger, or we walk outside and check the exterior without entering a condemned area. Rena looked at Meg. I like him. You have known him 40 seconds. He named the choices. Dorian's mouth moved at one corner. His tortoiseshell glasses made his eyes look larger, but not softer. Is anyone authorized to be working today? No, Meg said. The inventory began this morning. Your inspection was scheduled for tomorrow. I emailed at 7. A cancellation opened my afternoon. Meg checked her phone. The email waited beneath 6 messages from the attorney and the final package Celeste had sent before Meg finished declining it. The former contractor may have a key, she said. Marlowe Fitch. My aunt hired him. I know Mr. Fitch. Dorian returned the recorder to his case. Exterior first. They left through the front door, which required lifting from inside and a sharp pull from outside. Dorian did not call the problem age. He crouched on the wet porch, examined the lower hinge, and found 2 replacement screws shorter than the originals. The door dropped after an inadequate repair, he said. It is also old, Meg said. Old is a date range, not a cause. The correction should have irritated her. Instead, it made the building feel momentarily knowable. They circled the west wing beneath bare maples. The ground sloped sharply toward Lake Astor. Last year's leaves had collected along the foundation, pasted into dark layers by rain. Dorian photographed cracks, downspouts, and the patched sill beneath the dining room windows. The west porch door remained crossed by 2 weathered boards, nailed from the outside. None showed fresh movement. The sound did not repeat. At the rear corner, Rena stopped beside a metal vent half covered by an old hydrangea. Could something have gone through there? Dorian crouched. A raccoon, a determined cat, not a person. He pointed at bent mesh inside the opening. Something has been nesting in the wall. The thumps may have been material dropping through a cavity. Meg looked up at the 3-story wall. A gutter sagged above them, spilling a clear sheet of water past a boarded window. So the building is occupied. Most buildings are. The question is by what? Back inside, Dorian asked for permission to begin the unrestricted portion of his inspection. Meg signed an access form on the lobby desk while Rena returned to inventory. Dorian gave Meg a spare pair of safety glasses and an orange vest. "You may accompany me in cleared areas," he said. "If I say stop, you stop. If I say leave, you leave. Ownership does not alter gravity. Does it alter your fee?" "Only upward." They began in the basement, where the air smelled of stone, iron, and old water. Dorian moved methodically. Electrical panel, boiler, shutoffs, foundation walls. He photographed every meter before touching it, and dictated observations in clipped phrases. The boiler occupied an alcove behind a low stone arch. Its green jacket had faded around 2 newer control panels, and 6 copper lines left the top like the stems of a metal bouquet. Dorian read Sylvia's maintenance tags before opening anything. "Zone 2 lies," Meg said. He glanced at her. "Technical diagnosis? Last instruction from the deceased owner. More reliable than some service records." He turned the thermostat up while Meg stood beside the pipe map. The boiler fired. Zone 1 warned. Zone 3 ticked awake. The controller labeled Zone 2 displayed a confident red light, while the corresponding pipe stayed cold. "Valve actuator is stuck or mislabeled," Dorian said. "Not a boiler failure. Smaller problem." "You sound disappointed?" "I enjoy finding smaller problems. They are the only ones people can afford." He showed her how the basement separated the building's construction eras. The original granite foundation used broad stones fitted with lime mortar. The 1924 wing sat on narrower courses. The 1968 addition had concrete block and a cold joint that admitted a threat of water after rain. 3 buildings pretending to share a name, Meg said. "Most old inns are. The danger is assuming a repair that works in one section belongs in another." Near the west wall, adjustable steel posts supported a timber beam. 2 posts were properly seated on concrete pads. The third rested on a doubled scrap of plywood, compressed at the edges. Dorian photographed it from 3 angles. "Marlowe's stabilization?" Meg asked. "Possibly. The invoice should identify post type, footing, load estimate, and installation date. It says emergency stabilization, labor, and materials. Then it is a bill, not a record." His recorder captured the sentence. Meg wondered how often Dorian had been disliked by people whose work became clearer when described accurately. At the electrical panel, he found 2 handwritten breaker directories, layered over one another. Sylvia's block letters listed Boathouse beside Breaker 22. A later label, printed from a computer, called the same circuit Lower Auxiliary. "Who changed this?" he asked. "Marlowe did some electrical coordination during the winter work. A licensed electrician handled the panel. Name? The invoice may have it. Find it before anyone energizes lower circuits." He photographed the breaker positions and paper log clipped beside the panel. The final entry showed the boathouse circuit shut off in November. No restoration time appeared. They moved to the bulkhead passage, where the laundry cart stood beside shelves of folded dust covers. Dorian turned it slightly to read the manufacturer's plate, and set it back in the exact wheel marks on the floor. "You inventory carts?" Meg asked. Renovation injuries happen when people move weight through routes designed for linens and breakfast trays. The service drive beyond the outer door angled steeply downhill. Dorian lifted the handle before turning it, the same motion Rena had used that morning. "Why does everyone know to do that except me?" Meg asked. "Because you left before the hinge dropped." The answer contained no accusation, which allowed her to hear one anyway. Meg tried not to compare the process to medical rounds. Conrad's last year had been measured by people entering rooms with devices, naming one failing system at a time, and leaving her to assemble the whole. She had become excellent at asking what happened next. What happens next, she asked. Dorian aimed a moisture meter at the sill. Today, I establish whether anyone can safely work in the unrestricted portions. Tomorrow, I inspect structure with the town file and prior repair invoices. Then I tell you what is damaged, why, and in what order it matters. And whether the inn can reopen? That is not one question. It is how many rooms, under what permit, after which repairs, at what operating cost. You make reopening sound inconvenient. Reopening is extremely inconvenient. So is selling a building with undocumented defects. Before they went upstairs, Dorian examined the first floor side of the west restriction. He did not cross the yellow notice. He used a flashlight through an access opening and extended a camera on a pole into the JS cavity. Mr. Fitch and I served on opposite sides of a licensing complaint 3 years ago, he said while watching the screen. Opposite sides? A homeowner said he concealed water damage during a renovation. He said the damage appeared afterward. I documented that both accounts omitted relevant facts. That sounds less like opposite sides than a refusal to join either. It was not received that way. The camera light moved across blackened timber, pale new blocking, and a line of blue chalk. Dorian stopped it, reversed, and enlarged the image. There, he said. Meg saw a narrow straight cut across the lower portion of a joist. Its exposed wood was pale beneath gray surface dust. Is that the failure? It is damage. Cause requires closer inspection and records. Could it be part of a repair? If it is, the repair needs to explain why material was removed from an already compromised member. He saved the image twice, once to the camera and once to a small orange-tipped inspection pencil connected by cable. Backup? Meg asked. Buildings lose records when records become expensive. The basement door opened above them. Meg, Rena called, you have a contractor. Marlowe Fitch filled the kitchen doorway when they came upstairs. He was broad through the middle, with a close brown beard, pale lashes, and a navy work shirt bearing his name in red stitching. Rain darkened the shoulders. He held a rolled set of plans under one arm. Heard you were in town, he said to Meg. Thought I'd save you from discovering the place the hard way. His gaze moved to Dorian. Pritchard. Fitch. It was not a greeting so much as an inventory confirmation. Marlowe put the plans on the kitchen table. Sylvia had me shore the west dining beam after Christmas. Temporary work. I told her the whole section needed to come out. Dorian opened his case. Do you have the permit number? Emergency stabilization. That is a description. Town was closed for weather. Weather lasted 3 months? Marlowe looked at Meg. This is what you're paying for? He'll write 40 pages so he can charge you to read them. Meg had spent enough time around specialists to recognize an argument that needed no audience. I need the invoices and any photographs you took before and after the work. Rena, at the far end of the table, said, her contractor file contains invoices, no photographs. Marlowe's pale lashes lowered. Then they're on my office backup. I'll pull them. Dorian unrolled the plans. Blue chalk dust marked one edge of the paper and transferred faintly to his thumb. You still use blue? He asked. Shows on old timber. It also shows on everything else. Dorian wiped his thumb on a white evidence cloth from his case, looked at the color, and dropped the cloth into a disposal pouch. Marlowe gave a short laugh. You planning to prosecute the chalk? I'm planning not to carry it onto another surface. The front bell rang once. Not the doorbell, the brass desk bell. Rena looked toward the lobby. Did you invite someone else? Meg had not. Celeste Rusk stood behind the desk, as though she had checked herself in. She wore a camel raincoat over a cream blouse, cropped curls close to her head, and carried a cobalt notebook beneath one hand. Her deep brown face held the same brisk warmth as her voice. The door was open, she said. It requires lifting, Meg replied. So I discovered. Celeste came forward and offered her hand. I was nearby reviewing another parcel. I hoped 5 minutes in person might be more useful than another email. Her attention touched Marlowe, then Dorian, without pause. Too smooth to be surprise, Meg thought, and immediately marked the thought as interpretation rather than fact. They returned to the lobby. Celeste laid a single-page offer summary beside the brass bell. Northmark would take the property as is, she said. Existing contents, known defects, shoreline obligations. Closing inside 30 days. Rena stayed near the parlor doors with her tablet, officially inventorying a lamp. And turn it into what? Meg asked. A well-being destination. Small retreat groups, restorative programming, local employment. We preserve character by rationalizing function. Dorian, packing his recorder, went still for less than a second. Celeste noticed. Mr. Pritchard? Ms. Rusk. The second exchange held more history than the first. Meg looked between them. You know each other? Professionally, Celeste said. I consult in a small state, Dorian said. Neither answer was false enough to challenge. Marlowe leaned over the offer page. That's fair money for a building in this condition. You haven't seen Dorian's report, Meg said. I've seen the joists. Celeste tapped the deadline printed at the bottom. Northmark's committee meets Friday. I can preserve these terms until noon. The offer would pay the estate's debts, cover taxes, settle the attorney's projected costs, and leave Meg with enough money to return home without having to decide what came after home. She had discovered in the past 3 months that people respected grief most when it came with a plan. I will review it, she said. Celeste closed her notebook. That's all I ask. After she and Marlowe left, separately, though within a minute of each other, Rena waited until the front door shut. That was not all she asked. I know. Dorian stood behind the desk, examining a photograph on his camera. Ms. Ashworth, I need to disclose a potential conflict before I continue. The practical part of Meg's mind moved forward as the tired part stepped away. You have worked for Northmark. Not directly. I accepted a limited document review from a client whose ownership I have not yet verified. Some of the files overlap this property. When were you planning to tell me? When I could tell you whether it was a conflict or an attempt to create one. That will be in my written disclosure tonight. Rena set down her tablet. That's a very polished answer. It is also the accurate one. Meg looked at the offer page, the door Marlowe had closed, and the photograph on Dorian's camera. The screen showed a dark timber scored by a pale, straight line. What is that? She asked. Dorian enlarged the image. Blue chalk bordered a narrow cut in the wood. One of the west side joists Mr. Fitch called failed. And? He removed his glasses and wiped rain mist from one lens. Chapter 3. The temperature fell 12 degrees overnight, which Ashworth House announced by surrendering a pipe. Meg woke at 6 to a knocking sound inside the wall of her temporary room, followed by the steady hiss of water traveling where no water had been invited. She had slept in room 2 because its ceiling was dry, its radiator worked, and its mattress did not list toward the lake. This already placed it among the inn's better accommodations. She pulled Conrad's chore jacket over her pajamas and opened the door. Rena stood in the corridor wearing boots, black trousers, and the expression of someone whose contract had not included dawn plumbing. Kitchen is dry, Rena said. The sound is in the lakeside stack. Meg checked her watch. 6:03 by Conrad time, 6:01 by everyone else's. Boathouse line, she said. Sylvia shut it off every winter. Did she shut it off this winter? The pipe knocked again. We are about to inventory that decision. The shut-off diagram in the kitchen had been drawn in Sylvia's hand and amended by at least 3 plumbers. One blue line descended from the basement toward the boathouse. Beside it, Sylvia had written, lower valve sticks, use red handle. The red-handled valve in the basement turned easily and changed nothing. Lower valve, Meg said. Rena looked at the rain whitening the window. Naturally. By 7 the rain had dinned to mist. Meg changed into work clothes, called the emergency number on Marlowe's last invoice, and got voicemail. She called the town's listed plumbing service and was told someone could arrive between 9 and noon. The water continued to hiss inside the wall. Waiting until 9 would have been the sensible choice if water had respected office hours. Meg stood in the basement, with Sylvia's pipe diagram spread across the boiler casing, while Rena read labels by flashlight. The lower feed passed through 2 isolation valves, one drawn and one added later in red pencil. The penciled valve had no location note. Could be in the boathouse, Rena said. Could be under the service drive. Those are very different qualities of mourning. Meg checked the pressure gauge. It had fallen another 3 pounds. Above them, water moved through the wall, with the intimate persistence of someone whispering behind a door. Conrad would have called the plumber, put a stock pot beneath the sound, and made coffee while damage spread. Not from carelessness. He had trusted professionals and believed waiting became responsible once an appointment existed. Meg had trusted appointments too, until illness taught her that a scheduled answer did not stop a body changing before it arrived. She returned upstairs and packed what they might need. Flashlight, work gloves, the Lakeline key, 2 dry towels, and the small first aid pouch from the kitchen. She placed the first aid pouch in the canvas tote, took it out because this was a plumbing problem, then put it back. Rena watched without comment. "What?" Meg asked. "Nothing. That was observant nothing. You pack for systems failing in groups." Meg zipped the tote. Systems rarely consult one another before failing. At the top of the stone steps, Rena photographed their clean boot soles and sent the image to the inventory folder. "Why?" Meg asked. "Mud tracking. If we're evaluating flooring later, I want to know what we carried in ourselves." The small precaution seemed excessive for 6 seconds. By the time they reached the boathouse, it would become evidence of where they had and had not walked. "We can wait," Rena said. Meg could. The building could not. They took flashlights and descended the 64 stone steps to the lake. Meg remembered the count because Sylvia used to make children recite numbers on the way up. It prevented running, Sylvia had claimed. Meg suspected it also identified which child had started complaining before the halfway landing. Mist concealed the lower steps until they were nearly underfoot. Wet leaves turned the edges slick. On the lake, a buoy bell sounded somewhere beyond sight. The boathouse emerged slowly. Gray cedar boards, dark green doors, roof patched with 3 generations of shingles. The uphill service door stood closed. A wet track ran beneath it. "Pipe," Meg said. Rena aimed her flashlight at the landing. "Probably." Meg took the brass key from Sylvia's ring. It entered the lock but resisted. She lifted the handle, remembering the inn service door. This one opened without needing help. The smell met her first: wet cedar, old rope, machine oil, and something clean and chemical beneath it. Water spread across the floor from a cracked copper elbow along the uphill wall. The beam of Meg's flashlight caught the silver jump of the leak. Then it crossed an orange sleeve. Dorian lay beneath the loft ladder with one arm folded under him and his safety glasses several feet away. The sharp color of his rain shell made the rest of him look more still. Meg stopped. The practical part of her mind catalogued without permission. Ladder extended. Floor wet only near wall. No light overhead. Dark stain at Dorian's temple, small and already dried. A guest towel folded beneath one shoulder, as if someone had begun to make him comfortable and changed their mind. She did not touch him. "Back outside," she said. Rena had seen enough. Her face had gone flat and pale around the mouth. She stepped onto the landing but did not leave. "Is he?" "Call emergency services. Tell them a man is unresponsive. Tell them the floor is wet and the power may be off." Rena took out her phone. Meg stayed at the threshold. She had been present when Conrad died. That room had held a hospital bed, low afternoon sun, and a nurse who checked twice before saying the sentence Meg already knew. Stillness had a particular completeness. Dorian had it. She forced herself to look at the door rather than him. Blue dust marked the inside edge of the brass latch. Chalk, she thought. Marlowe's plans. Dorian's thumb. It was an observation, not an answer. "They're sending police and rescue," Rena said. 8 minutes. Good. Meg's voice sounded prepared, which was not the same thing as calm. "Go to the foot of the steps so they can see you." "I'm not leaving you here." "I am standing in a doorway," Meg said, her voice low, "not entering. You can see me from the bottom landing." Rena hesitated, then moved halfway up the steps, where the mist opened enough to show her rain cape. Meg called Dorian's name once. Nothing changed. She watched the water travel around the sole of his boot. It carried sawdust from beneath the workbench and left it in a thin crescent against the ladder. The towel under his shoulder remained startlingly white. The inn had been closed 8 months. Sylvia had covered the furniture, drained the kitchen, boxed soap, and sealed guest linen by room. Meg had seen Rena photograph those seals yesterday. The towel did not belong here. Sirens reached them first, as a change in the mist. Rena lifted both arms at the foot of the steps. Voices followed, then boots on stone. The first uniformed officer was a woman with a red braid tucked beneath her cap. She moved Rena uphill and asked Meg to step back without entering the boathouse. A paramedic and firefighter passed them. The officer took Meg's name and separated her from Rena before asking what they had done. Meg gave sequence, not theory. She heard Dorian's voice in the instruction. "We entered far enough to see him," she said. "I did not cross beyond the threshold after that. I touched the exterior handle, lock, and door edge. The water line was already broken. Did you touch the victim?" "No." "Anything inside?" "No." The officer looked at Meg's boots, then at the wet landing. "Stay here." The paramedics emerged without urgency. One spoke quietly to the officer. She touched the radio on her shoulder. Rena closed her eyes. Meg did not. There would be time later for the things her body wanted to do. At the moment, the building had become a place where a man had died, and every careless movement could change what remained. More officers arrived. The last person down the steps wore a navy field coat over his uniform and carried no visible hurry. He was compact, broad through the chest, with iron gray curls cropped close and boots clean enough that Meg noticed them before the mud claimed them. The officer with the braid met him at the landing. "Chief, confirmed deceased. Possible fall, but Dr. Menon wants the scene held. Position doesn't make sense with the injury." He looked toward Meg and Rena. "Which one found him?" "Both." He approached and introduced himself as Chief Armand Desrosiers. His hazel eyes moved from Meg's wet jacket to the key ring in her hand. "Ms. Ashworth, walk me through it." Meg did. Arrival time, broken pipe, red valve, steps, door, orange sleeve, Dorian. She kept the blue chalk and towel inside the account because she had seen them, but did not tell Armand what they meant. "You knew Mr. Pritchard?" he asked. "He began a building inspection yesterday. Did you expect him here this morning?" "No." "Did he have a key?" "Not from me." "Who does?" "My aunt did." "I do. Her contractor may have copies. My cousin may know about older ones." Armand nodded once. "Names." She gave him Marlowe and Bernadette. "Anyone have reason to be angry with Mr. Pritchard?" Celeste knew him. Marlowe disliked him. Dorian had a second client and a photograph of a joist that had not failed by itself. "Yes," Meg said, "but I don't know which reasons matter." Something altered in Armand's expression. Approval would have been too much. Revised assessment, perhaps. "That's useful," he said. "Keep doing that." An officer carried evidence markers inside. Another ran tape across the landing. The broken line continued to spit water. "The shutoff?" Meg asked. "Fire department will handle it after photographs. The water can damage the floor. The floor is no longer our first concern." The sentence struck harder than it should have. Meg heard Conrad's oncologist saying comfort is the priority now, as if priority were an orderly promotion rather than the removal of everything above it. She put both hands into the pockets of the chore jacket. A woman in a charcoal medical coat descended with a hard-sided case and spoke first to the paramedics. Armand introduced her as Dr. Kavita Menon, covering county medical examiner duties. She asked Meg only whether she had seen Dorian alive the previous day and whether he had complained of dizziness, breathing trouble, or a fall. "No," Meg said. "He climbed the basement stairs twice without using the rail." Dr. Menon wrote that down. "Thank you. I cannot discuss findings here. I didn't ask." The doctor's dark eyes lifted from the page. Most people do. An officer brought paper boot covers for the fire crew before they re-entered to isolate the pipe. The small action changed Meg's view of the morning. The police were not treating the building as scenery around a dead man. They were preserving paths, water, residue, and mistakes. Her own clean soul photograph sat in Rena's tablet upstairs, time-stamped before discovery. Her legs began to shake. Not visibly at first. A tremor moved from the muscles above her knees into her hips, a delayed physical conclusion. She sat on the lowest stone step because falling would create a new set of facts nobody needed. Rena came down one step and sat beside her without touching. "I packed a first aid kit," Meg said. Rena looked toward the taped door. "Of course you did. I thought the pipe might have cut someone." A pipe did not. The distinction should not have mattered. It did. Accidents preserved the possibility that preparation could help. What lay inside the boathouse had happened because another person chose it or failed to prevent it. A kit had never been relevant. Meg pressed Conrad's watch against the inside of her other wrist until the edge hurt enough to locate her. "I need you to tell the chief about the boot photographs," she said. "I already flagged them." "Good." Rena's shoulder rested near hers, not against it. "You don't have to manage me." "I am not. You assign me a task while shaking." Meg breathed in for 4 counts and out for 6. a technique learned in an oncology waiting room beneath a poster of a waterfall. I manage myself through delegation. That sounds efficient. It is exhausting. An evidence technician came down carrying Dorian's black inspection case inside a clear transfer bin. She stopped several feet away and asked Meg to identify it without approaching. He left it beside the lobby desk yesterday, Meg said. Camera, meter, laser level, hand tools. I did not open it. Did you move it after he left? No. I believed he planned to return. The sentence exposed an assumption Meg had not examined. Dorian's car had remained in the side lot. His case had remained in the lobby. She had noticed both and arranged them into a professional's untidiness rather than a person's failure to leave. What about his orange pencil? Rena asked. The technician checked her notes. Describe it. Waterproof inspection pencil. Bright barrel, metal clip. He kept it in the chest pocket of his shell. Was it present when you found him? Rena closed her eyes briefly, rebuilding the image. Meg remembered the folded towel, the orange sleeve, the empty wet floor around his hand. No pencil. I did not see it, she said. That does not mean it was absent. The technician wrote both answers. Good distinction. Police collected Dorian's rental key from his trouser pocket, his phone from beneath the workbench, and his safety glasses near the ladder. Each item received a marker before movement. The phone screen was cracked across one corner and dark beneath a film of water. Can water destroy it? Meg asked. Sometimes. Do not assume it did. Every person at the scene seemed to be teaching her the same lesson in a different uniform. The fire crew finally shut the broken feed. Water stopped spreading, but the damp line remained, a map of where it had traveled while they waited. Meg understood then that preserving a scene did not mean preventing change. It meant recording change well enough that later people could separate what happened before discovery from what happened after. The same would be required of memory. For the first time, Rena touched her, 2 fingers briefly against the sleeve of Conrad's jacket. Not comfort offered as a demand, confirmation of contact. Armand looked down at the open boathouse door. Was the light on when you entered? No. I used a flashlight. Did you try the switch? No. Good. Rena made a small sound. Not distress. Recognition. She was looking through the door at the towel. What? Armand asked. Rena pointed without stepping closer. The band along that edge. Blue with 2 white lines. You recognize it? I inventoried every linen closet yesterday morning. Her gaze went to Meg. That's from room 8. The mist shifted over the lake, revealing the empty water beyond the doors. Room 8 was in the sealed west wing. Chapter 4. Armand did not ask Meg what the room 8 towel meant until they were back at the inn. He asked who had sealed the linen, when Rena photographed it, whether any duplicate towels existed, and how many people could identify the room by the woven band. Rena answered from her tablet. Meg answered from Sylvia's inventory notes. Neither answer satisfied him, which Meg began to understand was not the same as disbelief. The police used the dining room for interviews because the lobby had too many doors. Rena went first. Meg waited behind the front desk with a mug of coffee she had forgotten to drink. The building sounded different now. Every pipe knock suggested movement. Every settling board arrived with an implied footstep. Yellow scene tape crossed the service passage entrance, and an officer stood where the dining room met the kitchen. Dorian's hard black case remained on the lobby floor beside the desk, exactly where he had left it. Meg looked away from the orange reflection stripe on its lid. At 10:30, Armand opened the dining room doors. Ms. Ashworth. Meg. He held the door for her. Walk me through yesterday from your arrival. The dining room was cold enough that breath almost showed near the windows. Armand sat across from her at a table that had once held breakfast for 4. He placed a digital recorder between them and stated the time. Meg gave him the day in order. The blocked front door, the West Wing noise, Dorian's early arrival, Marlowe and the repairing voices, Celeste and the offer, Dorian's second client disclosure, the cut joist photograph. Armand took notes with his left hand, his thumb bent crooked around the pen. Before continuing, he slid a second form across the table. Temporary property restrictions. The boathouse, service passage, West Wing threshold, and any room connected to the missing linen stay untouched until released. You can occupy room 2 and use the east bathroom. Kitchen use is limited to the sink and refrigerator until the plumbing inspection. Meg read every line. This closes the laundry route. Yes. The alternate route to the guest floors crosses the west stair landing. Then no commercial occupancy. There is no commercial occupancy. Keep it that way. The permit consequence existed before anyone formally said the word postponement. Meg signed, dated, and wrote acknowledgement only, not agreement as to property condition beside her name. Armand read the addition. You have spent time with attorneys. I spent 4 years with insurers. Attorneys are often clearer about being adversarial. You believed someone was inside the West Wing? At first. And now? Now I believe something was inside the wall. Dorian found bent vent mesh. That's not what I asked. Meg met his eyes. I don't know. He wrote that down too. Tell me about the towel. Different woven bands. Room 8 had blue with 2 white lines. Why? Rooms had different bed sizes and bath allocations. It kept sets together. Could someone take one without entering room 8? Yes. The linen closet serving rooms 7 through 9 is in the corridor. Inside the restricted wing? Just inside it. So the towel proves someone accessed the wing. It may prove someone accessed the linen closet. The distinction pleased her. Then she realized it was his distinction, and he had allowed her to reach it. Who could identify the towel? He asked. Any former housekeeper. Sylvia. Bernadette, probably. Rena, after inventory. Me, after Rena told me. Mr. Fitch? Possibly. He worked throughout the property. Miss Rusk? I don't know. Armand turned one page in his notebook. Preliminary examination suggests Mr. Pritchard suffered a head injury inconsistent with the latter position. Dr. Menon will not give us more until the county examination. Meg looked at the rain beyond the tall windows. So he did not fall. I said inconsistent. You would not be here if you thought the distinction favored an accident. His pen paused. You notice wording. I spent years in rooms where wording changed insurance coverage. He did not ask which rooms. Did Mr. Pritchard seem frightened? No. Careful. Different how. A frightened person thinks about escape. Dorian thought about records. Armand studied her for a moment, then ended the recording. You may continue ordinary work in unrestricted areas after my officer clears them. Do not enter taped spaces. Do not move anything related to yesterday's inspection. If you find something, stop and call. What about the sale? That's between you, the estate, and whoever wants a property where a man was just found dead. The sentence was blunt without being cruel. Meg preferred it to sympathy. And the building report? Will determine what belongs to the investigation. It also determines whether this place is safe. Then we have overlapping needs. Armand slid a card across the table. Mine takes precedence around evidence. For how long? As long as the evidence requires. That is not a date. It is the accurate answer. Meg opened the property calendar. A plumbing inspection had been scheduled for Monday. The insurer expected a condition update by Friday. Northmark's offer expired sooner. Dorian's report had been intended to inform all three. Can another engineer inspect unrestricted areas? She asked. After we document Dorian's route and equipment, the West Wing remains closed. Any new consultant receives the restriction map and coordinates entry. Can the plumber stop the active leak? Emergency containment under officer observation. Permanent work after scene release. Can Rena continue inventory? Unrestricted rooms only. No opening sealed packages connected to the linen question. Rena wrote each condition on a separate page rather than trusting the conversation to remain accurate under stress. Meg called the estate insurer from the dining room table, while Armand listened only long enough to ensure she did not disclose protected facts. The adjuster placed a temporary hold on Water Damage Authority and required a death event notice, police incident number, licensed plumbing report, and photographs of every affected route. Does the homicide investigation suspend coverage? Meg asked. The adjuster said, those are not the same. Correct. Meg wrote the distinction down. Review could become denial later. Today it was only another open file with a person behind it, who would not promise an outcome. The town inspector emailed 5 minutes afterward. Until police released the service corridor and the structural report could be verified, the occupancy application would not advance. No penalty, no approval. No clock stopped on taxes, heating oil, or emergency labor. Dorian's death was human before it was operational. The operational consequences arrived anyway. each in its own neutral language. Meg hated herself briefly for calculating them. Then she remembered that refusing to calculate did not honor him. It only left other people to decide what his death cost her building. She added 3 new folders to the desk: police, insurance, occupancy. None contained the whole event. Together they would determine whether she could still choose what happened to Ashworth House. The front door opened hard enough to strike its stopper. A woman's voice crossed the lobby. "Where is she?" Meg closed her eyes once. Bernadette Ashworth entered the dining room without waiting to be invited. She wore amber glasses spotted with rain, a charcoal coat belted tightly at the waist, and the expression of someone arriving at a hearing she intended to win. "You found a dead man in Sylvia's boathouse and didn't call me," she demanded. "The police have been here 3 hours." "Exactly." Armand stood. "Ms. Ashworth?" "Bernadette Ashworth, Sylvia's niece, the one who lived in the same state." Meg felt the old family blade enter precisely where Bernadette aimed it. "Chief Desrosiers is conducting an investigation," she said. "You need to speak with him." "I already did. On the way in, his officer asked if I knew Dorian Pritchard." Bernadette pulled off one glove finger by finger. "You might have mentioned that I argued with him yesterday." Armand's expression did not change. "Ms. Ashworth, we will speak privately." "Which Ms. Ashworth?" Bernadette asked. "You." She gave Meg a look of bitter satisfaction and followed Armand to the parlor. The satisfaction lasted less than a minute. Through the closed pocket doors came Bernadette's voice, sharp and fully audible because Old Wood valued disclosure over discretion. "I arrived at 1:20. Ask the woman with the tablet. She saw me leave." Meg looked at Rena. "I did not," Rena said quietly. "I was upstairs." Bernadette continued. "Dorian Pritchard had no right to discuss valuation with Margaret before the estate claim was resolved." Armand's reply was too low to hear. "Because Sylvia promised me," Bernadette said. "Not the whole property, a share. I kept the place running while Margaret sent holiday cards." Meg had sent birthday cards too, some years. The defense arrived automatically and was too small to deserve speech. Bernadette had driven Sylvia to medical appointments, delivered groceries, argued with contractors, and spent at least 2 weekends stripping beds after Sylvia could no longer manage the stairs. She had also billed the estate for mileage, submitted receipts for meals that appeared to serve 4 people, and told the funeral director Meg would want the cheapest urn before Meg had been asked. Family specialized in making truth feel like disloyalty to whichever fact came second. The parlor door opened. Bernadette emerged with color high across her cheekbones. "The chief wants the blue account book," Meg said. Bernadette stopped. Sylvia's letter had named it. Meg had not intended to use the information as a weapon. Intent, she was discovering, did not prevent good aim. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sylvia said you had it." "Sylvia said many things when she was ill." Armand appeared behind her. "What account book?" "A blue ledger," Meg said. "Sylvia's note says Bernadette has it." Bernadette's mouth tightened. "It's family material." "Then you do have it," Rena said. "You are an employee. Do not interpret me." Rena looked almost interested. 3-day contractor. Armand moved between the exchange and escalation without visibly stepping. "Bring the book to the station today. Do not remove, add, or alter anything." Bernadette pulled on her gloves. "You all seem very comfortable taking instructions from a dead woman when they benefit Margaret." She left through the front door. It caught at the bottom, forcing her to lift the handle. The gesture looked practiced. Meg filed that observation beside every other person who knew how the inn's doors behaved. Rena appeared from the kitchen carrying her tablet and 2 fresh cups of coffee. "Family? Technically. That's an estate sentence." Meg took 1 coffee. "She helped Sylvia during the last year. Errands, appointments, paperwork. She believes the inn should have been left to her." "Does she have a claim?" "She has anger. The attorney says those are different documents." Rena glanced toward the parlor doors. "Was she here yesterday?" "Apparently." "That seems relevant." "Everything seems relevant in the first 3 hours. I assume the difficulty is surviving long enough to learn what isn't." They returned to the second-floor inventory, after the police released the east corridor. The west wing remained sealed. Room 8's linen closet sat 6 feet beyond the yellow notice, inaccessible without an officer. Rena stopped at the boundary and opened yesterday's photographs. The first showed the corridor at 8:10 a.m. The yellow notice was intact. The second showed the linen closet doors through the open transom angle. Each shelf bundle had been wrapped in brown paper and closed with a white inventory seal Sylvia had signed. Rena enlarged the image. Room 7, green bar. Room 8, blue, 2 white. Room 9, gold. The room 8 bundle seal was intact in the photograph. An officer came upstairs when Meg called. He photographed the notice, then entered with gloves and a body camera. Meg and Rena watched from the boundary while he opened the closet. The brown paper around room 8's towel sagged open. The white seal had been cut. "When did you take the picture?" the officer asked. 8:10 yesterday morning, Rena said. "The file has location and time metadata." "Who was in the building after that?" Meg counted. Herself, Rena, Dorian, Marlowe, Celeste. Possibly Bernadette, if her argument with Dorian happened here. Anyone with an exterior key. Anyone behind the thumps in the wall. Her phone vibrated. Celeste Rusk had sent a message. "Given today's tragic event, Northmark is prepared to extend the offer deadline by 24 hours. We hope this provides stability during a difficult time." Meg showed the screen to Rena. "That's considerate," Rena said. Considerate would be removing the deadline. Below them, a police radio sounded in the lobby. The officer inside the closet lifted something from the shelf. A narrow strip of white seal, sliced cleanly through the signature. Meg's gaze returned to the photograph. The seal had still been whole after she entered the inn, after the noise in the west wall, and less than an hour before Dorian arrived. Someone had opened it while the building was occupied. The officer photographed the cut seal against a scale, then asked Rena to export the original image without editing or compression. Rena did, narrating each tap for his body camera. "Can you identify whether a towel is missing?" he asked. "Not by count alone," she said. "The bundle was wrapped. I recorded dimensions, not contents." Meg opened Sylvia's housekeeping binder on her tablet backup. Room 8 should have 6 bath sheets, 6 hand towels, 8 washcloths, and 2 bath mats in closure storage. The officer counted through the opened paper. 5 bath sheets. The wrong guess theory formed in Meg's mind with immediate seductive neatness. Someone had slept in room 8, used a towel, met Dorian, and taken him to the boathouse. It connected the sealed wing noise, the towel, and the body in one line. Then Rena said, the bed was stripped and covered. Nobody could sleep there without leaving more disturbance than one missing towel. Meg looked through the transom at the dust-covered corridor. Rena was right. A theory that explained everything too early generally explained only the thinker's appetite for order. "Write down both," she told the officer. "Possible unauthorized guest and possible removal for another use." He gave her a neutral look. "I write my own notes." "Of course." Rena waited until he turned back to the closet. "Civic education." Meg lowered her voice, apparently remedial. Chapter 5. The laundry cart had been cleaned by someone who did not understand wheels. Meg found it at 11 the next morning, after Armand released the unrestricted half of the linen room for inventory. The cart stood upside down on a folding table, while Rena photographed its canvas bin, metal frame, and 4 gray rubber casters. "Top is clean," Rena said. "Frame is clean, axles are not." Meg crouched without touching. 3 wheels held the usual mixture of gray lint and floor dust. The 4th contained sand in a dark band inside the rim, higher than a wheel rolling across a level floor should have collected it. "Boathouse landing," she said. Rena lowered the tablet. "Possibly." "You're enjoying that word?" "The chief asked us to distinguish observations from conclusions. I'm supporting civic education." An officer waited at the doorway. Meg stood and called him over. He stopped them from moving anything, summoned a scene technician, and wrote down where the cart had been found. While they waited, Rena opened her inventory photographs from the first morning. The cart had been upright beside the linen room shelves at 9:15. A folded stack of dust covers filled its bin. In the photograph, the frame showed a thick layer of lint around the lower braces. Now the braces were clean. "Someone used it after 9:15, Meg said, and wiped the parts they could see. Rena pulled up the service route photographs from their first day. The linen room opened onto the narrow passage behind the kitchen. At its far end, the outer door met the sloped drive. Between them waited 3 turns, one around the capped service elevator, one past the wall hose hooks, and one where the passage narrowed beside a radiator. "An empty cart clears all 3, Rena said. "A loaded one?" "Depends on the load. And who was steering." They measured without moving the cart. The canvas bin was 40 inches long, 28 wide, and deep enough to hide the shape of folded bedding. or a person lying with knees bent. One brace carried a shallow orange scrape beneath its wiped surface. Dorian's rain shell. Meg did not say it until the scene technician arrived. The technician photographed the scrape under alternate light and collected a minute orange filament with tweezers. Could be paint, she said. His coat was orange, Meg replied. Then County compares it. We don't compare it by looking. Meg nodded. Another piece of civic education. The technician asked them to show the likely route without entering taped space. Rena stood at the linen room threshold and described normal cart movement. Clean folded stock out, soil bags in, wheels inspected monthly, bin washed only after contamination. Sylvia's checklist required staff to park carts handle out, so nobody backed blindly into the passage. The recovered cart had been handle in. Why does that matter? The officer asked. If you push a loaded cart downhill, you walk behind the handle, Rena said. Coming back uphill empty, you'd pull from the front. Whoever returned it kept pulling all the way into the room and left the handle facing the wall. Meg saw the movement, weight rattling toward the lake, empty canvas returning uphill, someone unwilling to release the cart and walk around it, in a corridor that might hold witnesses. Can you tell how heavy the load was? She asked. The technician indicated the sand band, possibly from wheel deformation and residue depth. It won't give us a neat number. Nothing gives neat numbers, Meg said. Scales do. Rena pointed at the old linen scale mounted beside the shelves. Its dial stopped at 300 pounds. Sylvia had used it for commercial laundry bags, recording outgoing weights so the service could not charge her for water. A clipboard hung beneath it. The last legitimate line dated 8 months earlier. One fresh indentation marked the paper below the final entry, too faint to read, but deep enough to show someone had written on a missing top sheet. The technician took the entire clipboard. The person who moved Dorian had not merely used the inn's equipment. They had followed its habits far enough to weigh what they carried, or pretended to. The technician changed gloves and brought over evidence paper. When she lifted the cart, gray fibers clung beneath the axle housing. She collected the sand and fibers before taking the whole cart. Could that carry a person? The officer asked. Rena measured the bin. The inn used it for wet sheets. It could carry the weight. Meg pictured the sloped service drive, the sandy landing, and Dorian's orange shell inside gray canvas. The room 8 towel had not made him comfortable. It had padded an edge. She kept the image to herself. The plumber arrived at noon with an apprentice named Drew Havel. Drew was short, strong through the shoulders, and pale beneath a dense spray of copper freckles. 2 pencils sat behind one ear despite the safety glasses occupying the same territory. Lower valve failed closed, they asked. Failed open, Meg said. Better for the pipe. Worse for everything the pipe is pointed at. The plumber, an older woman named Cass Vachon, shut down the lake line at a second basement valve and sent Drew to trace the obsolete feed. The work stayed outside the taped corridor until Drew stopped beside the plywood over the service elevator. Was there a wall hose here? They asked. 2 brass couplings hung on hooks beside a rectangular outline in the paint. For fire use originally, Meg said. Sylvia had it removed when the hose rotted. Drew leaned close without touching. One of those has been scrubbed. Cass Vachon sent them back to the basement while the officer arranged another evidence collection. Drew traced the abandoned hose line through the pipe map and physical fittings, calling measurements up to Cass without pretending to know what the walls concealed. This feed was capped near the riser, they said. The couplings stayed as hangers, decorative except not decorative enough to remove. Who capped it? Meg asked. Drew checked the initials stamped into the copper tag. MF, Marlowe. You recognize his mark? Everybody in trades around here recognizes everybody else's marks. Mine is DH, with the H crossing the date. They pointed to a newer repair beside the shutoff. The neat tag carried their initials and the previous winter's date. If you can't say who touched a system, you can't know where the responsibility changes hands. The principle sounded like Dorian translated into pipework. You worked for Marlowe? Drew's shoulders drew up. Apprenticed with him one summer. He gave me a chance when the engineering program and I had stopped speaking. Was he a good teacher? Sometimes. Cass looked over from the valve. That's an honest answer. Meg did not. Would he replace a coupling the morning after a man died? Meg, Rena warned. Drew took both pencils from behind their ear and aligned them along the pipe ledge. He replaces stock when he uses stock. Was that coupling stock? Could have been. March and Micah carries old sizes because half the lake still has old sizes. Would he scrub a fitting before putting it back? Drew's freckled face closed. Ask him. I intend to. Then don't make me the warm-up question. The words landed with enough force that Meg stepped back. Drew was not a source arranged for her convenience. They were a young tradesperson whose former employer might be tied to a death, and every answer could damage work, loyalty, or both. You're right, she said. I'm sorry. Drew studied her as if apologies were materials requiring grade verification. The pipe doesn't care. People do. Cass turned the replacement valve. The gauge held. Lake feed isolated, she said. Boathouse line stays dead until the police and an inspector release it. I'll put that in writing because apparently we're all learning the value of paperwork this week. The lower coupling was dull brown, its ridges packed with blue-green mineral scale. The upper one shone yellow along the threads. Meg called the officer again. By 1, the linen room had been taken from them entirely. At this rate, Rena said, our inventory will consist of places we are no longer allowed to stand. They ate cheese sandwiches in the lobby. Rain had stopped, leaving the windows pale with drying tracks. Meg had just unfolded Sylvia's contractor file when Marlowe entered without ringing. His gaze went first to the taped service passage. Heard they moved the scene uphill. Who told you? Meg asked. Town this size? Pick a person. He set a plastic folder on the desk. Backup invoices. Photos didn't survive a server change. Rena took the folder but did not open it. Convenient. Marlowe's expression hardened. I came to help. Then help me understand the couplings, Meg said. He looked toward the passage again. What couplings? From the old wall hose. Scrap hardware. Sylvia kept everything. One was recently cleaned. Then she cleaned it. Sylvia died 6 weeks ago. Marlowe spread his hands. I don't know what answer you want. A factual one. Fact is, this place has 100 years of junk and now the police think every brass fitting is a murder weapon. Meg had not said weapon. Rena's eyes shifted to her, then away. Marlowe saw the exchange. I'm not stupid. Dorian got hit. Everybody knows. The police haven't released that. His cousin works county dispatch. It was possible. In Dunnet, possibilities seemed to be the most crowded room. Marlowe pushed the folder toward her. You meet a contractor who knows the building, not people turning lint into a conspiracy. The West Wing is finished. Sell before the estate eats whatever value is left. Dorian thought the joist had been cut. Marlowe looked from Meg to the photograph. His jaw tightened before he shook his head. Dorian thought suspicion was a billable service. Did you cut it? For stabilization. Relief cuts can stop a split from traveling. Were they in your invoice? Technical details aren't itemized for laypeople. Rena said, That's not how invoices work. Marlowe's attention moved to her. And you are? A front door opened. Armand entered with rain on his navy field coat, though the rain had stopped everywhere else. He took in Marlowe, the folder, and the sealed passage. Mr. Fitch, good. I need you at the station. Marlowe forced a laugh. Am I under arrest? No. Then I'll come when I'm done here. Armand's voice stayed level. You are done here. Marlowe left after telling Meg not to authorize structural work without him. The instruction hung in the lobby like an odor. Armand watched the door close. What did you ask him? Meg told him. Coupling, weapon assumption, cut joist, relief cuts. Next time, he said, call before you question a homicide suspect. I asked my contractor about my building, and when he said something only the killer might know, I stopped. After asking whether he cut the joist, Meg folded her hands on the desk. Walk me through the part where I am allowed to manage the estate. Armand looked tired rather than angry. You manage it, you document it, you do not test reactions without telling me, because you cannot know which reaction is dangerous. Rena closed the contractor folder. That's fair. Meg looked at her. Supporting civic education, Rena said. Armand placed an evidence receipt on the desk for the cart and coupling. Counting will compare the fibers and cleaning residue. Until then, do not announce what you think happened. I think Dorian was killed inside the inn and moved downhill in that cart. Armand did not confirm it. He also did not tell her she was wrong. Document the basis, he said. Then let us test it. After he left, Meg opened Marlowe's invoice folder. The top sheet listed emergency stabilization, labor, materials, and disposal. No relief cuts, no photographs, no permit number. Beneath it lay a receipt from March and Micah Supply. Blue chalk line, utility blades, brass hose coupling. The date was yesterday morning. Rena photographed the receipt before Meg moved it. The thermal paper had already begun fading at the edge, but the transaction number remained clear. "Call Armand," Rena said. "I will, after we verify what the receipt actually says. It says coupling. It doesn't say which coupling, for which job, or who picked it up." Rena considered the distinction and put on her coat. March and Micah Supply occupied a long green building near the old rail depot. Half the front room smelled of cut lumber. The other half smelled of rubber hose and fertilizer. A brass ship's clock above the counter showed a time 11 minutes behind Meg's watch and 13 behind reality. The clerk, a broad woman with silver hair braided tightly down her back, introduced herself as Kelda March and refused to discuss Marlowe's account until Meg showed a state identification and explained that the receipt had been left with property records. "I can tell you what the product code means," Kelda said. "Other jobs, or whether he enjoys long walks. Product code is enough." Kelda entered the transaction number. 3/4-inch cast brass swivel coupling. Old fire hose standard. We keep 2 because inns and camps never throw out plumbing until it becomes archaeology. Who bought it? Account sale to Fitch Restoration. Who collected it? Kelda's eyes moved from Meg to Rena. "That's not product code." Meg put Armand's card on the counter. "Then please preserve the receipt record and any security footage." That changed the clerk's posture. Not toward helpfulness, toward procedure. "Camera overwrites in 7 days," she said. "I'll flag it for retention when he calls." Rena pointed to the glass counter. "Is that the same model?" One coupling sat in a divided bin beneath marine fittings. Kelda placed it on the counter without letting them touch. Its ridges, width, and flat-edged collar matched the cleaned piece hanging in the service passage. "When was this transaction?" Meg asked. Kelda turned the monitor enough to show the line. "Thursday, 8:12 in the morning." Less than an hour after Meg and Rena found Dorian, Marlowe had replaced a piece of hardware from the inn before police had publicly identified anything missing. Kelda folded her arms. "I will say this once before the police arrive. Marlowe has bought fittings here for 20 years. A purchase is not a confession." "I know," Meg said. "Do you?" The question sounded like Drew's objection in a different register. Dunnet was full of people who depended on one another's work. Accusing a contractor did not affect only the contractor. It reached apprentices, suppliers, clients, families, and every person whose furnace failed on a Sunday. "I know the receipt proves a purchase," Meg said. "The timing makes it evidence. The police decide what it connects to." Kelda gave a short nod. "Better." Meg called Armand from the store vestibule. She described the receipt, product match, transaction time, and camera retention, without telling him what conclusion to draw. "Leave the original where it is?" he asked. "In Marlowe's folder at the inn. Rena photographed it before we came here." "Good. An officer is heading to both locations." "Drew said Marlowe replaces stock when he uses stock." "Drew told you that voluntarily?" Meg looked through the glass at the rows of fittings. "Not exactly. I pushed." "Stop pushing apprentices." "Already learned." "Write down the exact exchange while it's fresh." The call ended. Rena handed Meg her tablet without comment, open to a blank note with the time already entered. Meg recorded every question, every answer, and the point where she had asked one question too many. Chapter 6. Celeste raised the offer by 12% the morning after police took the laundry cart. The new number arrived in a cream envelope delivered by courier, as if paper quality could make urgency respectable. Meg read it twice at the lobby desk while Rena entered contractor receipts into a spreadsheet. "That pays every estate debt," Meg said, and leaves enough to stop making every decision around cost. Rena did not look up. Money doesn't stop that. It changes which costs get to introduce themselves. "Do you rehearse these lines?" "Only the expensive ones." The revised offer included an as-is clause, a confidentiality provision, and a noon deadline the following day. Northmark would assume responsibility for known code defects, but could withdraw if the property became subject to criminal forfeiture or an environmental order. "They wrote this after the death," Meg said. "They want you to read stability." "I read fear." Meg read both. Her attorney joined by video at 9, looking as if he had already objected to the day. Leonard Vale had silver half-glasses, a narrow office, and a talent for making risk sound like an item someone had ordered. "Do not sign the confidentiality clause," he said. It conflicts with mandatory disclosures and could be construed as an attempt to limit cooperation. Could I accept without it? You could counter. Northmark could withdraw. What does the estate carry if I don't sell? Leonard shared a spreadsheet. Property tax, insurance, temporary heat, legal administration, emergency stabilization, a reserve for environmental and code review. The total for 6 months was large enough to make the raised offer feel less like money than an unlocked door. Rena leaned toward the screen. What about limited operation? Leonard looked over his glasses. Who are you? The person discovering the closed-in has better records than the estate. Meg introduced her. Leonard added a second column. If 6 rooms passed a scoped inspection, if the kitchen received a temporary food approval, if the fire marshal accepted restricted wing separation, and if insurance agreed, limited operation might offset carrying costs in 4 to 6 months. How much initial cash? Meg asked. He entered a range. The low number exceeded what she could access without selling investments Conrad had intended for their retirement travel. The high number assumed the roof did not introduce itself personally. And if no rooms pass, then you have spent money learning the property is expensive. Rena said, that's still information. Information does not reimburse an estate. Meg looked at the 2 columns. Sell now, or pay for the right to make a later decision. Sylvia's 30 days had not included a funding source. A claims specialist named Orrin Tuck asked whether the death occurred in a guest access area, whether commercial operations had resumed, whether police suspected a property defect, and whether Meg had knowledge of unpermitted work before accepting coverage as executor. Meg answered exactly. Each accurate answer seemed to close another invisible door. Coverage remains under reservation of rights, Orrin said. Meaning? We continue investigating without confirming indemnity. A meeting sentence, Rena murmured. Meg muted the call long enough to say, an insurance sentence. Similar habitat, more teeth. The police had sealed the service passage, room 8's linen closet, and part of the boathouse. Dorian's report was incomplete. The attorney warned that the estate might have to notify insurers of both the death and suspected unpermitted structural work. Each answer generated a pause before it generated clarity. At 10, Marlowe arrived with no appointment and an engineer's letter from 18 months earlier. The letter described temporary shoring in the west wing and recommended full replacement within 6 months. Sylvia ignored it, he said. Now Pritchard's dead, the town is nervous, and Northmark is offering fair money. There isn't a puzzle here. Where is the permit for your work? Meg asked. Emergency stabilization. Still not a permit number. His jaw tightened. You think a form makes the beam safer? I think a form tells me what you claim you did. Marlowe tapped the engineer's letter. That tells you. It tells me what was needed, not what you did. Rena turned her tablet so the supply receipt faced him. Why did you buy a brass coupling the morning after Dorian died? Marlowe's eyes flicked toward the service passage. For a job on Dutton Road. Client? Rena asked. You don't get my client list. The police will, Meg said. Then let them ask. He collected the engineer's letter and left it only when Meg said her attorney would subpoena a copy if he removed it. The word subpoena did more than reason had managed. After he went, Rena said, I should not have asked him about the receipt. Armand told me not to test reactions. He did not tell you. That's a loophole sentence. I know. They called Armand together. He arrived with Joel Mercer and a paper bag from a bakery 20 minutes away. Joel was tall and narrow-shouldered, with sandy gray hair and wire spectacles fogged by the temperature change. I was told there were people here attempting to subsist on coffee, he said. This is a municipal emergency adjacent to, but legally distinct from Armand's. Armand took the receipt and the revised offer. Joel teaches music at the school. He is not part of this investigation. I am part of lunch, Joel said. Then I leave. He distributed soup and bread at the dining room table, asked no questions about Dorian, and told Rena where to find extension cords that met the fire code. Meg understood why Armand had brought him. Not comfort exactly. A reminder that ordinary systems continued beside the terrible one. When Joel left, Armand spread the documents between them. March and Micah confirms Fitch bought a coupling at 8:12 Thursday morning, he said. He says it went to Dutton Road. We are verifying. He knew Dorian was struck, Meg said. Half the county believes that. Information escaped through dispatch family. It should not have. So it proves nothing. Rena folded her soup lid into smaller and smaller rectangles. What about the cart? Sand matches the boathouse landing in general composition. Fibers are consistent with insulation in the service passage. Consistent is not exclusive. And the towel? Meg asked. Dorian's coat carries fibers from it. The room became very quiet. Meg pictured the clean towel beneath his shoulder. It patted him in the cart. That is a reasonable working theory. Armand said it without triumph. A man's last movement had been reduced to how his body fit inside hotel equipment. There was no version of the solution that made the fact less ugly. He continued. I need your full inventory photographs and access records. Those include every defect we found. Yes. The town will see them. Potentially. The insurer. Potentially. Meg looked through the dining room windows at Lake Astor. Sun had opened a pale path across the water. Conrad used to accuse her of doing risk assessment when he wanted an answer. She had accused him of calling it spontaneity when he wanted her to absorb the consequences. She had loved him. They had still been unfair to each other in specific, durable ways. If I give you everything, she said, I may lose the occupancy appeal and the offer. Armand did not soften the answer. You may. If I don't, you may be withholding material evidence in a homicide investigation. Rena stopped folding the lid. Meg took the backup drive from her jacket pocket. She had made it that morning and carried it while deciding whether preparedness counted as intent. She placed it on the table. Full photographs, file metadata, spreadsheet, and the scan of Sylvia's contractor records. Armand looked at the drive, then at her. Copies? On my laptop and another drive in the safe. I need those too, or verified for forensic images. The request hurt more than the first. He was not congratulating her for choosing correctly. He was making the choice complete. Meg got the safe drive and laptop. Armand logged each item and gave her receipts. By 3, the police were gone, and the town inspector had emailed notice that her occupancy review was postponed. Northmark's deadline remained noon tomorrow. Rena leaned against the lobby desk. You did the right thing. That phrase is generally offered when the right thing has made a situation worse. It made the paperwork worse. The paperwork is attached to the building. So are you, apparently. Rena closed the laptop. I need to tell you something before attached becomes a job description. Meg waited. My contract ends tonight. You have asked me to stay in the inn, manage evidence-adjacent inventory, coordinate trades, and speak to police. Those are not 3-day inventory tasks. I can extend the contract. For what role? Operations. Meaning. The word opened beneath Meg. She had meant everything needing organization, which was not a role. It was a method of making another person responsible for whatever Meg did not define. Reservations, if there are reservations. Vendor files. Room readiness. Inventory control. Authority? To make recommendations. Rena shook her head. Recommendations are responsibility wearing a visitor badge. If I am accountable for room readiness, I need authority to stop work, reject unsafe inventory, and document who overrides me. Housing would be included. Housing is not pay. I didn't say instead of pay. You said it before pay. Meg felt herself becoming excessively courteous, the surest sign that anger had arrived wearing formal clothes. What are you asking for? A written 6-month offer if you choose not to sell. Salary, housing terms, scope, and authority. A 1-week evidence support extension now, paid at my contract rate plus emergency hours. No family business language. No gratitude in place of overtime. I have never called this a family business. Not yet. The answer was unfair and useful. Meg thought of the years she had coordinated Conrad's care because love made the work invisible to everyone except the person doing it. She had resented every relative who praised her devotion while failing to take a shift. An inn built on the same arrangement would not become kinder because she owned it. Draft the 1-week extension, she said. We negotiate the 6-month roll only if I reject the offer. You draft it. Employer's first responsibility. You have very specific ideas about a job you don't yet have. That's why I might survive having it. Meg opened a blank document. The first line, temporary evidence support and inventory extension, made the situation look official enough to become real. They spent 40 minutes on 5 paragraphs. Rena rejected assist as needed because it meant everything and therefore protected no one. Meg rejected full operational authority because the inn had no operations and Rena had been there 3 days. They settled on inventory preservation, vendor scheduling, room condition documentation, police request coordination, and authority to halt any contractor activity that crossed a taped boundary or contradicted a licensed professional's written instruction. Emergency hours, Rena said. Time and a half, after 8 in a day or 40 in a week. Housing. Room 4, subject to inspection, no deduction from wages, while police activity makes off-site lodging impractical. Meals. Shared groceries, not compensation. Confidentiality. Meg considered Northmark's clause. Guest and estate privacy, except mandatory reporting, legal process, safety, and your right to discuss working conditions. Rena stopped typing. You know that last part? I know what it feels like when care work depends on nobody describing the care. The sentence stayed between them. Rena did not ask about Conrad, and Meg was grateful enough to distrust the gratitude. They signed electronically. Rena forwarded the agreement to Leonard for the estate file and added her emergency hours from the boathouse morning. You counted the time after we found him? Meg asked. I was working. Meg's first instinct was to say some moments sat outside payroll. Her second recognized that those moments were usually the ones employers most wanted donated. Correct, she said. Rena saved the final copy. That hurt you. Only in the educational sense. The agreement did not make them family or friends. It did something more useful for the day. It told each woman what the other had promised. Rena opened the operating condition inventory they had started before Dorian died. If you reject Northmark, we need a credible minimum reopening, she said, not a dream version. The town postponed inspection. Postponed is not cancelled. We document what can be separated from the crime scene and the West Wing. They took the east stair with the police restriction map. Room 1 had a dry ceiling, but a radiator valve that would not close. Room 2, where Meg slept, needed a smoke detector and a door closer. Room 3 had a cracked sink. Room 4 was sound except for a window lock. Room 5 smelled faintly of mice. Room 6 contained 3 dismantled bedsteads and a stack of lamps from elsewhere. Rena entered each defect, responsible trade, dependency, and estimated inspection consequence. She refused to label anything easy. Easy means the person writing the list is not the person doing the work, she said. Window lock, limited scope. Better. At room 4, Meg opened the lake-facing curtains. Afternoon lights spread over faded green wallpaper and a narrow iron bed. The room looked modest, intact, and entirely capable of holding someone else's suitcase. Housing, Meg said. If inspection passes. Rena stood in the doorway rather than entering. It needs a lock change if contractors have old masters. Every possible future seemed to contain another key whose owner they could not name. They listed 6 rooms with plausible repair paths, not promises. The total minimum cost remained painful but no longer abstract. Some of the work, alarms, locks, valve service, cleaning, could proceed quickly. Other work depended on the structural report now missing Appendix B. 6 rooms, Rena said on the landing. Maybe, possibly, Meg corrected. Civic education works. Meg looked down through the stairwell to the lobby desk and its brass bell. 6 rooms would not restore Ashworth House. They might, however, let the building earn enough to continue being a problem. On the way down, she stopped beside the West Wing notice. An officer had added evidence tape across the threshold and initialed both ends. Yesterday, the door had represented deferred maintenance. Today, it held a crime scene, a structural threat, and half the inn's earning capacity behind one frame. No work crosses this line without written release, Rena said, adding the restriction to the renovation board. Even emergency work? Especially emergency work. Emergencies are how people turn an exception into access. Meg thought of Marlowe arriving with solutions before anyone requested them. She wrote verify who declared the emergency beneath Rena's note. It was not yet a clue. It was a rule the inn had learned at considerable cost, and rules had a way of revealing who needed exceptions. The brass bell sat between them, dented, tarnished, and still capable of calling the whole lobby to attention. For 30 days, she said. Rena did not argue. They returned to Dorian's preliminary report, working from the paper copy police had allowed them to retain. Pages 1 through 8 covered foundations, electrical hazards, and roof drainage. Page 9 ended with a reference to Appendix B. Page 10 began with Appendix C. The page numbers remained sequential. The appendices did not. Meg held the report toward the window. The staples had been opened and pressed flat again. "Someone removed Appendix B," she said. Rena searched the table, Dorian's file folder, and the scan they had made before turning over the laptop. The scan skipped from A to C2. Appendix B had been gone before the police arrived. Chapter 7. By 9 the next morning, 4 people had arrived at Ashworth House, with 4 different reasons to resent Dorian Pritchard, and 1 shared objection to waiting in the lobby. Armand solved the problem by making them wait separately. Bernadette went into the parlor with an officer and the blue account book sealed in a grocery bag. Inez Voyer, treasurer of the Lake Astor Association, occupied the cold end of the dining room. Celeste sat at the far side of the lobby with her cobalt notebook closed on her lap. Marlowe stood beneath the main stair and objected to the arrangement as a category. "You asked me to come voluntarily," he told Armand. "Voluntary means I can leave." "Correct. Then why am I waiting?" "Because leaving and being interviewed are currently incompatible." Marlowe looked toward Meg as if she had written the answer. She and Rena worked behind the front desk under the terms of their evidence support agreement. Work consisted of matching room keys to Sylvia's register, while observing nothing the police had not placed directly in front of them. This was a limited category. Room 1's key wore a round brass tag. Room 2's was oval. Room 3's tag had been replaced with plastic and should not have been. 3 master keys remained on hooks inside the locked cabinet. Sylvia's register listed 5. 2 missing masters, Rena said quietly. 1 may be Bernadette's. And the other? Meg entered unknown because speculation did not become useful through repetition. Armand brought Inez into the dining room first. The pocket doors closed, but failed to seal the conversation. Inez's voice carried in clean accounting phrases. The stabilization grant covered the East Shore as a corridor. Funds move within corridors. Armand said something too low to hear. No, Dorian did not agree. Dorian believed categories were load-bearing. Rena's fingers paused over the key spreadsheet. Meg kept her eyes on Room 4's tag. Inez had met Dorian at the shoreline the afternoon he died. If he had found grant money missing, she had motive. She also knew the boathouse, the association's lake access agreements, and which properties kept lower door keys. The dining room doors opened. Inez emerged wearing a rain cape repaired at one shoulder with gray sail tape. Her silver hair was clipped close to her scalp, emphasizing a face made sharp by fatigue. She stopped at the desk. Your aunt understood that a washed-out retaining wall does not wait for a board vote. Did you move grant money? Meg asked. Armand appeared behind Inez. Meg. 1 word. A complete reminder. Inez answered anyway. I kept the lake from taking my sister's foundation. Dorian wanted the association to report the transfer and repay the fund before summer work. We do not have the money. Enough that the number has become more interesting than the wall it paid for. That isn't an amount. 28,000. Rena stopped entering keys. Inez's expression dared either of them to imagine a collapsing foundation as a tidy line of unauthorized expenditure. The grant reimbursement was delayed. My sister's house was taking water. The board chair was in Florida, the state office was closed, and the contractor would not reserve equipment without a deposit. I transferred the money for 72 hours. How long ago? 9 months. That is a long 72 hours. The emergency work uncovered additional damage. Armand said, and you submitted invoices from Association Shore Work to conceal it. Inez looked toward him. You said this was not a public interview. It became public when you answered questions in the lobby. The correction silenced her more effectively than accusation. Meg opened Sylvia's maintenance calendar on the desk. A September entry recorded 3 dump trucks passing the inn toward the North Shore on the same date as an association work closure. Sylvia had written Inez moving the lake again in the margin. Dorian saw these records? Meg asked. Inez's mouth flattened. He asked for them. Sylvia kept notes no reasonable person would preserve. Sylvia believed reason was what people invoked after losing a receipt. Inez nearly smiled, then remembered why she was there. Dorian planned to report the transfer before Friday. The association's insurance could cancel. Summer permits could freeze. Every property around the lake would pay for one wall. Motive, Meg thought, not proof. The two remained dangerously willing to dress alike. Did you threaten him? I explained consequences. People who sell consequences often call them explanations, Rena said. Inez looked at her. And people new to town often mistake a clean rule for a fair result. Neither woman had enough information to be entirely wrong. Armand escorted Inez to the front door and reminded her not to discuss the interview. She promised nothing. Bernadette came next. She surrendered the blue account book only after the officer gave her a receipt. The ledger contained household expenses, private payments, and notes in Sylvia's compressed handwriting. Bernadette said she had removed it to calculate money Sylvia owed her. Why deny having it? Armand asked. Because every object in this house becomes Margaret's the moment someone writes estate on a folder. That is how inheritance works, Meg said. Bernadette turned on her. No, that is how paperwork works. Inheritance is who showed up before the paperwork. Armand asked when she arrived the day Dorian died. 1:20. I left before 2. Witness? Dorian saw me. Marlowe's truck was outside. The inventory woman was somewhere upstairs. Rena shook her head once. She could not confirm departure. What did you argue about? Armand asked. Valuation. If the inn was worth enough, my claim could be paid without selling. He said claims did not change structural condition. Did he tell you what he found? He told me the building had been interfered with. The lobby went still. Exact words, Armand said. Bernadette adjusted her amber glasses. He said someone has interfered with the West support system. I asked whether that increased or reduced value. He said it increased litigation. Who else heard? Marlowe was in the kitchen. Marlowe pushed away from the stair. I was not. Armand looked at him. Bernadette left with no ledger and enough anger to power the inn's unreliable Zone 2. Celeste entered the dining room at 10:40. Her interview lasted 42 minutes and produced no raised voices. When the doors opened, she crossed directly to Meg. Northmark is suspending its offer, she said. The announcement should have brought relief. Instead, the financial floor dropped 6 inches beneath her. Because of the investigation? Because material information was not disclosed. A man died after you wrote the first offer. The structural interference may predate it. Celeste kept her voice low. Dorian was working for a reviewing entity connected to us. Your estate knew he had a second client and did not notify our counsel. I learned that yesterday afternoon. Then you understand why the committee lacks confidence. Meg looked at the cobalt notebook. You told Armand you saw Dorian at the boathouse. Celeste's professional warmth cooled. I saw a figure in an orange coat near the lower building at approximately 7. The boathouse lights were off. There was light. From where? The service drive overlook. Meg pictured it. The gravel turnout sat above the boathouse roof, screened by bare alders. From there, a person could see the lake doors and part of the uphill landing, but only if light came from inside. Why were you on the service drive? I was assessing vehicle access for Northmark. After business hours without permission, the drive was open. The property was not. Celeste pressed one finger against the notebook's edge. Your gate stood open. Mr. Fitch told me site access had been cleared. Marlowe, still beneath the stair, said, I did not. You emailed at 4:18. I said lower access was clear of equipment. You knew why I asked. The exchange exposed a channel between them. Both had avoided naming. Armand held out his hand. Phones, both of you. Marlowe laughed once. No warrant. Then preserve every message, email, and call record. Deletion after this instruction will be documented. Celeste's notebook remained closed, but the pressure of her grit bent its cobalt cover. Meg asked, What exactly did the figure do? Celeste looked back at her. Moved from the uphill door toward the lake doors. Orange coat. Medium height. I assumed it was Pritchard because I had seen him wearing it. Could you see his face? No. Could you see whether the coat contained a person walking under their own power? For the first time, Celeste had no polished answer ready. If Dorian had been inside the laundry cart, orange fabric might have shown above the canvas as Marlowe moved him through the uphill door. Celeste's sighting could be true and still be a lie in every way that mattered. Armand stepped between them. That's enough. Celeste turned toward him. I answered your questions, and now you're answering mine outside the interview. Your civilian asked. She is not my civilian. The phrase was so precisely non-possessive that Meg almost appreciated it. Celeste left. Her shoes made no sound on the slate. Marlowe's interview came last. He carried the engineer's letter into the dining room and emerged 26 minutes later without it. A red flush climbed above his collar. "You gave him my receipts," he said to Meg. "You left them with the state records. That coupling was for Dutton Road." He asked why I knew the linen door was locked at 6. Rena looked up sharply. Marlowe continued, too angry to notice. "Because I checked the building. That's what contractors do." "Which linen door?" Meg asked. "The service door past the elevator." "It doesn't lock." "Of course it locks. The outer lock works. From inside, the latch sticks unless you lift it." Meg placed both hands flat on the desk. "If you checked it at 6, how did you know it was locked rather than stuck?" Marlowe's face tightened. The change could have been anger, alarm, or the effort of rebuilding a careless answer after the fact. Sylvia had keys. Sylvia was dead. Armand came through the dining room doors. "Mr. Fitch, do not leave town without notifying us." "Am I under arrest now?" "No." "Then stop talking like I am." Marlowe left hard enough to make the front door catch. He lifted the handle by reflex before wrenching it open. Rena waited until his truck started. "He said locked," she said. "Yes. The chief must have used that word first." Armand shook his head. "I asked whether he used the service passage after 5:30. He volunteered that the linen door was locked at 6. 4 suspects remained. Bernadette had inheritance, anger, and access. Inez had diverted money and shoreline knowledge. Celeste had a second client connection and an impossible sighting. Marlowe had structural sabotage, replacement hardware, and knowledge of a door that did not behave the way he claimed. Rena turned the key cabinet inventory toward Meg. 5 masters in Sylvia's register. 3 in the cabinet. Bernadette admits she copied 1 years ago, but says she returned the original. That accounts for a possible copy, not a missing key. Marlowe's winter invoice includes temporary master access, no key number. Celeste entered yesterday without waiting for us. Front door was open after Dorian came in. Inez knows the boathouse agreement. Knowing an agreement is not holding a key. Meg appreciated the resistance. A suspect list was not a set of boxes waiting to be checked. It was a collection of people whose ordinary access overlapped one extraordinary act. Armand placed 4 blank index cards on the desk. At the top of each, he wrote a name. Beneath 3 headings: motive, access, corroboration. "No means yet?" Meg asked. "Means is often the first thing people imagine and the last thing evidence proves." Rena pointed to Marlowe's card. "Coupling. Possible means," Armand said. "Not established means." He added a 4th heading to every card. Lie that is not murder. Bernadette's blue ledger. Inez's grant transfer. Celeste's undisclosed site review. Marlowe's unpermitted work. Anyone could explain concealment without explaining Dorian's death. Rena added times beneath each card. Bernadette confirmed at the inn from 1:20 until at least 2:17. Departure uncertain. Inez shoreline meeting at 11:35, later travel still being verified. Celeste documented arrival at 6:40, claimed earlier sighting from the Overlook. Marlowe, multiple unlogged visits, last confirmed by Drew before 5, later location unsupported. Only Marlowe has no clean end time, Meg said. Armand capped his pen. Only Marlowe's clean end time has not been established. Different statement. Do you correct everyone this often? Only when they give me sentences that outrun facts. Rena drew a final row. What would this person need to know? Bernadette knew family keys, boiler calls, and old linen practices. Inez knew shoreline access and boathouse agreements. Celeste knew Northmark's inspections, Dorian's second engagement, and the property offer. Marlowe knew the west framing, controller, service doors, cart storage, and emergency routes. Access is not one thing, Rena said. A guest can enter the lobby. A housekeeper can enter linen closets. A contractor can enter walls. And an owner can enter all of it, Meg said. Armand looked at her. Which is why your records and timeline were checked first. The reminder should have offended her. Instead, it made the investigation feel less like a social judgment. Everyone's ordinary authority created a different version of opportunity, including hers. Meg copied the 4 headings onto the renovation board, but left the names on Armand's cards. The board was not evidence. It was a tool for preventing one person's ugliest secret from becoming a complete explanation through visual convenience. Tomorrow we verify the shoreline route and account records, Armand said. After that, family correspondence. Do not tell either person what the other has said. Inez already told the lobby, Meg said. Then do not improve on her error. Armand opened the blue ledger on the desk. The problem with 4 reasons to lie is that murder requires only one of them. Meg looked at Sylvia's cramped columns. Then we separate the lies. Chapter 8. Inez Voyer believed shoreline erosion should be viewed from below, where it could make a proper threat. At 10:30, she stood on a strip of gray beach north of Ashworth House and waited for Meg to descend a bank that appeared to have been assembled from wet roots and old objections. Lake Astor pushed small waves against the stones. Each retreat carried away a soft clicking handful. That, Inez said when Meg reached the bottom, is what the grant was for. Meg looked along the bank. Red survey stakes marched between hemlocks. One leaned toward the water at the angle of a person losing an argument. Above it, the shoulder of Shore Road showed through a torn place in the soil. The association grant, Meg said. The public stabilization corridor. 9 properties, 3 culverts, 1 access road. Inez set off without checking whether Meg followed. Her repaired rain cape snapped in the wind. Dorian walked this section Wednesday. He understood that the work was necessary. He also understood that $28,000 was spent somewhere else. Both statements can be true. That was the reason for the tour. Inez did not want absolution. She wanted context admitted into evidence. Meg had accepted the invitation because a woman willing to confess unauthorized spending in a crowded lobby might disclose something useful on an empty beach. Armand had approved the walk only after making its terms painfully clear. Meg could look at the shoreline, she could listen, and she could not handle records, search property, or suggest that she acted for the police. He had added, "You do not act for the police," in case the grammar left room for optimism. Inez stopped where a fan of fresh gravel descended from a concrete apron. This is the southern end of the approved work. Dorian photographed every repair. He asked why the invoices showed stone delivered here when the truck records showed North Point. Your sister's house. Stell's house. Inez made the correction as if kinship were too imprecise for a financial discussion. Built in 1948. Foundation reinforced in 1972 by men who believed rebar was a rumor. The October storm opened a channel under the northeast corner. They climbed a set of plank steps to Shore Road. Across it, a narrow lane rose through spruce trees toward a square white house. Blue tarp covered part of the exposed foundation. A stack of granite blocks sat beside a mud-streaked excavator. Stell Voyer stood at the end of the lane in a red knit hat, holding a file box against her chest. She was broader than Inez and 3 years older, with the same brown eyes and none of her sister's willingness to turn a sentence into a ledger entry. You brought Margaret, Stell said. Meg said. Sylvia called you Margaret. Sylvia considered nicknames an improper depreciation of assets. Stell's mouth moved at one corner. That sounds like her. Inez pointed at the box. What is that? What you should have brought to the board 9 months ago. Permit copies, contractor demand, photographs, and the letter I wrote telling you not to move association money. For the first time since the lobby interview, Inez looked surprised. Stell continued. Chief DeRosiers asked me to preserve everything relating to the work. I am doing that. You may explain the bank. You may not improve your explanation with my records. Meg liked her immediately, which was inconvenient because liking witnesses encouraged the same errors as disliking suspects. Did Dorian come here Wednesday? Meg asked. At 12:10, he photographed the foundation from the lane. He did not enter the house. Inez said, You told me he arrived at noon. He was visible at noon. His boots reached my property at 12:10. I was on a call with the town manager. The time is on the log. Did you hear them argue? Meg asked. Stell considered Inez. I heard my sister tell him that reporting the transfer would suspend every remaining project. I heard Mr. Pritchard say the suspension would be the board's responsibility, while concealment was hers. A category distinction, Inez said, a useful one. Wind moved through the spruce boughs with the sound of distant traffic. Meg could see why Inez wanted the place viewed. One corner of the house hung over patched earth. A line of water staining marked the cellar blocks. The need was real. So was the choice to make 8 other properties unknowingly pay for it. When did Dorian leave? 12:28, Stell said. He walked south. Inez drove. Where? Inez folded her arms. Town office, fuel station, association shed, then my house. And later? Nowhere near the inn, if that is the question you came to ask. It is one of them. Stell shifted the box. Ask the chief for the traffic records. Half the town has door cameras now. People buy them to watch bears and discover their neighbors have schedules. Inez's chin lifted. I already gave him mine. That sounded less like innocence than irritation at inefficient procedure. With Inez, the two might be identical. They returned to the beach by the plank steps. At the boundary marker, Inez crouched and pressed 2 fingers into a fresh collapse. If the work freezes, she said, spring runoff takes another foot. If the insurance cancels, no contractor touches the corridor. Dorian knew that. He still planned to report you. Yes. Did you want him stopped? Inez rose. Mud darkened her fingertips. I wanted him delayed until I could restore the money. How? A private loan, sale of my camp lot, an advance against next year's dues. I had options. Did any of them exist on paper? Not yet. Then you had wishes with columns. Inez gave her a level look. You have been and done it less than a week, and already you sound like your aunt. Meg did not know whether it was accusation, warning, or diagnosis. They continued south until the approved corridor ended at a public access stair. Orange fencing blocked the lowest landing, where runoff had opened a cavity beneath the concrete. A laminated association notice promised repair upon release of scheduled funds, language that concealed more than it communicated. How many people know why the funds are not available? Meg asked. Stell knows what I did. Dorian knew. Now the police know. The property owners paying dues do not. Not yet. If Dorian had not reported you, when would you have told them? Inez looked across the lake, rather than at the broken stair. After restitution. So the corrected balance would become permission not to disclose the transfer. The work would be done. No property would lose stabilization. And no one would know their treasurer decided whose emergency counted most. Wind pressed Inez's cape against her narrow frame. Committees move slowly because consequences are distributed. Water moves quickly because it has no committee. That does not make you water. The answer landed. Inez folded the notice's loose corner beneath its staple, a small repair performed while the larger one waited. Dorian said nearly the same thing, she admitted. Less elegantly. The admission gave Meg something motive never could, the exact shape of the conflict. Dorian had not threatened the shoreline. He had threatened Inez's right to define necessity alone. At the inn, a green pickup occupied the service turnout. A man in a faded canvas coat stood beside the laundry cart, while Rena held a clipboard between them, like a small administrative fence. Piers Nadeau, Rena said as Meg approached. Boatwright. He was here to look at the dock winch. I stopped him from touching the cart. She said it with enough detail that I believed her, Piers said. He was lean, with dark curls bleached copper at the ends, and hands marked by ground-in varnish. He spoke slowly, leaving small spaces between clauses as though checking each for loose hardware. Meg looked at the cart. It had been returned after county technicians lifted fibers and sand. A red evidence release tag hung from the handle. One wheel still bore a brown crescent above its hub. Armand said we could test a released cart with inert weight, Rena said. Not that one. Drew found another in the east storage room. A second canvas-sided cart waited by the passage door. Its frame was the same model, though one caster squeaked when the wind nudged it. Piers glanced toward the stone steps. You want to know how sand reached high on one wheel? Without assuming the answer, Meg said. Good. Assumptions make expensive boats. He checked the test cart's tire width without moving it. These wheels are too small for the landing. Fine on corridor tile. Bad on sand, worse with weight. Rena had filled 4 sealed water jugs and stacked them inside, beneath 2 bags of driveway salt. The load did not approximate a body in any human detail. It simply gave the cart resistance. 196 pounds, she said, cart included. Dorian weighed 178, Meg said, then wished she did not know. Piers looked at neither of them, enough to demonstrate. They wheeled the cart through the service passage and out the uphill door. Meg lifted the handle before turning the latch. Piers noticed. Door always do that? Long enough for people to mistake habit for design. The service drive sloped down behind the inn, first gravel, then packed dirt. Piers walked beside the cart with one hand hovering near the frame. Rena pushed. Meg watched the wheels. On the straight descent, the cart pulled slightly lakeward. At the switchback, the downhill wheel took most of the load and sank at its outer edge. Rena corrected with both hands. "It wants to turn," she said. "It wants the shortest route to the lake," Piers said. "Equipment doesn't share your priorities." At the boathouse landing, the packed path gave way to wind-blown sand. The downhill wheel stopped dead. The cart pivoted around it, tilting enough to make one jug thump against the canvas. Piers raised a hand before Rena tried again. He crouched without touching the wheel. Sand adhered in a band nearly 4 inches above the bottom of the tire. "There," Meg said. "Loaded cart bites on the downhill side," Piers said. "Push harder, it plows. Pull sideways, it climbs the tire. Empty cart skims more than it sinks." Rena looked up the hill. "Could ordinary laundry make that mark?" "Wet linen could, full housekeeping load could, but you said this building was closed. Linen was sealed." Piers studied the grade, then the released cart visible far above. "Whoever brought your other cart down fought it here. Might have dragged the uphill side to straighten it. That would put the heavy mark on one wheel." The demonstration did not identify hands, it gave weight to a route. Meg pictured the orange shell visible above gray canvas, the cart turning at the landing, a person leaning into it while Celeste watched from the overlook and translated shape into assumption. "Could someone roll it back uphill alone?" she asked. Piers took longer with that answer. "Empty, yes. Loaded, not unless they were stronger than they looked or angrier than was sensible." "It returned empty," Meg said. Piers had Rena remove the salt and water, then repeat the last 20 feet with the unweighted cart. This time the caster skipped across the landing. Sand powdered the rubber at the bottom but did not climb the sidewall. "Same route," Rena said. "Different mark. Different load." Piers pointed to 2 shallow parallel lines behind the wheels. "And the person pushing has choices. With weight, you brace uphill and let the cart lean. Empty, you can keep it square." Meg took a measuring tape from Rena's field bag and held it beside the mark without touching the tire. Rena photographed the scale. On the released cart uphill, the brown crescent rose to almost the same height. "Similar is not identical," Meg said. Piers nodded. "Ground changes, moisture changes, wheel pressure changes. I can tell the chief a loaded cart makes that kind of mark here. I cannot tell him what the load was or whose hands pushed it." Piers's restraint gave Meg more confidence in everything he had said. Certainty offered too cheaply was generally being sold for a reason. Rena looked at the frame. Would it leave anything else? Piers studied the canvas sling and the point where its lower seam rubbed the metal crossbar. A heavy, uneven load shifts. Cloth works against the frame. If the county found fibers, they should compare the lower seams, not just the bed. Meg remembered the roommate towel, white against orange fabric in the boathouse. Padding could keep a cart from marking what it carried, while marking itself in subtler ways. "We'll give that to Armand," she said. The lake struck the boathouse doors with a flat wooden knock. Rena wrote down Piers's wording exactly. "Would you tell Chief de Rogers what you just told us?" "If he asks." "He will," Meg said. "Then I will." Piers looked toward the dock. "Your winch cable is rusted through 2 strands. Nobody uses it until I replace it." The shift from homicide mechanics to maintenance was abrupt and oddly comforting. Buildings did not suspend ordinary dangers out of respect for extraordinary ones. When they returned uphill, Armand's cruiser stood beside Inez's truck. Inez waited in the lobby with her cape folded over one arm. A county investigator photographed the contents of a banker box on the dining room table. Armand met Meg at the desk. Ms. Voyer brought association statements, grant documents, and personal loan inquiries, he said. Inez corrected him from across the lobby. The loan inquiries were obtained under subpoena. I brought the grant file. Thank you for preserving the distinction. Meg removed her wet jacket. Stell has another box. Already collected. Piers reconstructed the cart landing. Loaded, the downhill wheel sinks high in the sand. He gave a statement while you were coming up. Armand set one of his index cards on the counter. Inez's name headed the page. Under motive, he had written the grant amount. Under corroboration, 3 times and 2 camera locations had been added. You found her truck, Meg said. The town garage camera records it heading east at 5:38. Fuel station video places it at the pump at 5:51. Her home camera records it entering her driveway at 6:03. It does not leave until Thursday morning. The death window sat between 5:58 and 5:58. The body had been moved after 6. Could she have returned on foot? Meg asked. Inez made a disgusted sound. Armand did not. Her phone and 2 neighbors support that she was home. County is comparing her boots with impressions from the service drive, but the visible tread is inconsistent. He drew 1 line through access on Inez's card, then stopped before crossing out her name. She diverted the money, Meg said. Yes, but she did not drive the service road during the death window. Correct. Inez remained motionless beside the dining room doors. Exoneration from murder had not restored the funds or repaired the bank. It had only returned her wrongdoing to its proper size. Meg looked at the remaining 3 cards. The shoreline lie had separated cleanly. Chapter 9. Bernadette signed with a force that nearly tore the page. Under purpose, she wrote, "Recovering my own life." They worked in the archive room with the door open. Bernadette identified photographs and supplied names Sylvia had omitted. She was useful when anger did not get in her way, and sometimes useful because it did. "That is Alden, not Albert," she said, tapping a photograph of 2 boys on a dock. Albert never came north after 1963 because Sylvia told his wife the truth about the silver. "What truth?" Rena asked. "That it was plate." Rena entered the correction without looking up. For 40 minutes, no one mentioned the letters. Their absence pressed harder with every labeled box. Bernadette opened a flat box, saw the green tape, and stopped. Her gaze moved to the index beside Meg's hand. "You counted them," she said. Meg did not ask a question. Bernadette laughed once, without humor. "That is Sylvia's trick. Leave a silence and let someone fill it badly." Meg waited. "They were mine. The index says they were Sylvia's copies. The words were about me. That is not ownership." Bernadette's jaw set. "Easy to say when a probate court has made you the owner of every room where my name was spoken." Officer Patel turned a page in the lobby. The sound carried through the open door. Rena placed both hands on the sorting table. "Do you have the 4 letters?" Bernadette looked at her, then at Meg. "You said we weren't being questioned." "I said no such thing," Meg replied. "The chief told me not to question you. And this is your idea of obedience?" "So far." Bernadette stood. The canvas tote remained empty on her chair. "They're at my house." Meg did not move. "I took them Wednesday," Bernadette said. "Dorian had finished telling me that unpaid labor was not an encumbrance on real property. I came in here to find the letters Sylvia wrote after Mother died." "You told Armand you left before 2. I left the lobby before 2. I used the back stair." Rena's expression flattened. "You signed the archive log at 2:17. "I did not sign anything. I logged your access." Bernadette looked betrayed by the existence of clerical competence. Meg said, "Officer Patel will contact Chief Desrosiers, and then they will take the letters and hand them to a court and call it neutral." Bernadette gripped the back of her chair. "Sylvia promised I would not be left with nothing. That is not what you told me. You said she promised you the inn. Because that was what the work was worth." It was an answer to a different question, and that made it more honest than many Bernadette had given. Meg closed the archive index. "Bring the letters here. Unopened envelope or document sleeve. Officer Patel will accompany us to the porch, and Armand can collect them." "You said you wouldn't follow me." "I won't. You can bring them or the police can obtain them another way." Bernadette's eyes brightened with angry tears. "You have no idea what I did for her." "Then help me document it." Meg expected her to leave and force the warrant. Instead, Bernadette picked up her thermos and abandoned the empty tote. 20 minutes, she said. Officer Patel waited in the foyer while Bernadette drove away. A second officer parked on the road rather than follow closely enough to turn cooperation into pursuit. She returned in 18 minutes with a manila envelope held against her coat. Patel accepted it, recorded the time, and called Armand. Bernadette refused the lobby chair and stood beneath the portrait of a 19th century Ashworth, whose whiskers implied disapproval of electricity. Armand arrived with document sleeves. He photographed the envelope before breaking its paper clasp, then arranged the 4 letters on the desk beneath clear weights. "Ms. Ashworth," he said, "I need you to confirm these are the documents you removed." "They are." "Did anyone else handle them?" "No." "Did you remove anything else?" "No." "Why these 4? Bernadette looked at Meg, but answered him. "Because they proved Sylvia knew what she owed me." Armand read the first letter silently. His face did not change. He read the second. then passed both to Patel for bagging. At the third, his eyes paused halfway down the page. "This is dated 6 years ago," he said. Bernadette folded her arms. "The dates are visible." He turned the page so she could see the line he indicated. Sylvia's handwriting slanted across the paper in dark blue ink. Meg read, "I know 2 winters at the desk, and all those nights with the boilers were work, not family favors. If the sale ever comes, I will see you paid before I take my own foolish share." Bernadette said, "There." "It acknowledges work," Meg said. "It acknowledges payment. From a sale, which you are arranging, which is suspended." Bernadette's composure cracked. "Because a stranger died in a building I kept alive while you sent Christmas cards." The accusation reached an old, unprotected place. Meg had not known the boilers failed. She had not asked. Sylvia had made distance easy, and Meg had accepted the convenience. Rena opened the archive index to a section Meg had not yet reached. Tucked behind it was a packet of narrow timesheets, each ruled by hand. Dates ran across the top. Beneath them, Bernadette had recorded midnight boiler resets, frozen pipe checks, breakfast shifts, and hours spent covering Sylvia's medical appointments. "These are yours?" Rena asked. Bernadette glanced down. "Sylvia told me to keep them. They stopped 4 years ago. She said family did not punch clocks. After telling you to punch one?" Consistency was something Sylvia expected from weather reports and other people. Meg read 1 week in January, 31 hours at the inn, in addition to Bernadette's job at a pharmacy in Brattleboro. 2 emergency calls fell after midnight. Beside one, Sylvia had written "paid in soup," then crossed out the joke and initialed the entry. "Why didn't you file a claim with these?" Meg asked, before remembering Armand's prohibition. Bernadette's expression sharpened. "Because I was told the claim required a number. The letters gave me the number's meaning." Armand said, "Meg, I know." He photographed the timesheets, but did not take them immediately. "These may matter to probate. Unless they relate to the death investigation, they remain as state records. Preserve them exactly where they were found." Rena entered each page range in the archive log. Meg had spent years managing municipal grants in which undocumented labor was treated as if no person had performed it. She knew why rules required proof. She also knew who benefited when the person doing the work had been too tired, trusting, or ashamed to make a record. Bernadette had made one. Sylvia had trained her to make it, then changed the terms. That did not make Bernadette heir to the inn. It did make the word nothing less accurate. Armand touched the 4th letter. "This one is dated 3 months later." Sylvia's ink had faded at the fold. "You keep making my gratitude into a deed. It is not one. I will pay the hours we can prove, and I will not sign the house to you because you have decided wanting it is the same as keeping it." Below that, in a narrower line, "Dorian looked at your figures and says deferred family help is not an ownership interest. I dislike him for being correct," in a voice that suggests he invented correctness. Bernadette stared at the letter. "Dorian had already rejected the claim," Meg said. "He rejected ownership, not wages." Again, the distinction mattered. Armand said, "When did you last speak to Mr. Pritchard on Wednesday?" "At 1:55 in the front hall." "You remained in the archive until when?" 2:43, approximately." "Where did you go afterward?" "Out the kitchen entrance. I drove to Bellows Falls to see my daughter." "You told me you left before 2. Because I knew how staying would look." "It looks worse after a lie. Everything looks worse after your officers put it in a plastic bag." Armand did not react. "Your daughter confirms you arrived at 4:20. We are checking the route." Bernadette turned to Meg. "Are you going to pay me?" "If the estate owes documented wages, the estate should pay them." "That is not a promise." "No. Sylvia promised." "Sylvia promised at least 2 incompatible things in 4 letters. I am not going to choose the one you prefer while a police officer is bagging them." Bernadette lifted her chin, but her anger no longer concealed the injury beneath it. "You always did know how to make caution sound like virtue, and you know how to make injury sound like title." Neither statement solved the other. Meg opened a clean folder and placed the copied timesheet inventory inside. "The estate attorney will need originals, wage rates for each year, any payments already made, and the limitation period. Your claim does not become stronger if the evidence is mixed into family correspondence." Bernadette stared at the folder. "You are turning my life into tabs. I am turning it into something a person who was not there can evaluate. That is the problem. Everyone who decides will be someone who was not there. Meg thought of the nights Bernadette had logged beside Sylvia's boiler, and the years Meg had spent beside Conrad's medical bed. Care performed in private became unbelievable with alarming speed once the person who received it could no longer confirm the hours. Then the records have to carry what they can, she said. Not ownership they do not promise, not gratitude they cannot measure. Work. Rena added a preservation sheet to the folder and wrote that the archive pages remained estate property pending probate review. Bernadette read every line before signing acknowledgement of the copy process. If the estate pays wages, she said, will you tell people I was right? About the wages? Always a smaller sentence. Smaller sentences are harder to use against the truth. Bernadette signed anyway. Her grievance had not become a title deed. It had become specific enough to survive without one. Armand dismissed Bernadette after arranging a formal interview for the next morning. She took her lemon thermos and left the canvas tote behind. Meg carried it to the coat hooks, but did not follow her outside. When the door closed, Rena released a breath. She lied about 3/4 of an hour, she said. Early in the afternoon, Armand replied. It establishes access and concealment, not the death window. He turned to the remaining letter. There's a postscript. Meg leaned over the desk. Sylvia had crowded the bottom margin with housekeeping instructions unrelated to the argument. If you insist on moving the west linen shelves, use the linen lift diagram, not Marlowe's measurements. Manual is in service records. The old route matters, even if no one remembers why. Rena read it twice. Linen lift? The service elevator, Meg said. Sylvia called it the lift when she wanted it to sound less dangerous. I inventoried the service records. There was a maintenance manual, but I only checked the cover and page count. Armand raised a hand before either woman moved. Where is it? Locked records cabinet behind the desk, Rena said. Evidence access log on the clipboard. 2 keys, both in my custody since Thursday. Meg looked toward the cabinet. The old service elevator's route connected the linen room, back stair, kitchen, and the passage where Dorian's voice note had begun. A diagram could show more than floors. It could show fixtures, doors, and paths hidden behind later walls. Armand called Patel back from the dining room. Photograph the cabinet before it is opened, he said. Then we look at the manual. The family letters had not delivered a murderer. They had delivered a map. Chapter 10. The service elevator manual weighed 6 pounds and had survived 93 years by making itself unpleasant to read. Its gray cloth cover smelled of dust and machine oil. Brass fasteners bound pages dense with diagrams, inspection stamps, and instructions composed before manufacturers accepted responsibility for human error. Rena placed it on the lobby desk, beneath the camera, while Officer Patel recorded the cabinet opening. Page count says 84 plus 6 foldouts, Rena said. Meg checked Sylvia's archive card. 5 foldouts listed here. The manufacturer calls the wiring schematic an insert. Sylvia calls it a foldout. Then we begin by disagreeing with the dead about categories. Armand stood on the guest side of the desk, gloved hands resting at his sides. You begin by not turning a page until Patel photographs it. The town building inspector arrived carrying a hard hat, a flashlight, and the expression of someone who had postponed a full day to supervise adults near an obsolete lift. Cass Vachon followed with Drew and a canvas tool bag that remained zipped. No one opens the shaft, the inspector said. No one energizes anything. No one removes the plywood. We compare documents to accessible surfaces, and if a wall needs opening, I issue a scope. Armand said, police restrictions are narrower. No entry beyond the evidence tape without me. Good. 2 authorities saying no should improve the odds. Rena turned the cover. The first 20 pages concerned load limits and weekly greasing. Sylvia had annotated several in pencil. Beside a warning against transporting passengers, she had written, then give housekeeping stairs that fit human knees. The first foldout showed the lift cage and pulley assembly. The second mapped electrical service. The third opened across the desk in 3 panels, revealing each floor as a thin black plan. A dotted line ran from upper linen closets to the service elevator, through the back corridor, and into the kitchen. On the ground floor panel, the route passed the wall where the abandoned fire hose had hung. Rena checked the remaining tabs without opening them. All 6 present. Patel photographed the binding, each tab, and the page before allowing them to continue. "There," Meg said. 2 circles marked 1/2 in hose hangers beside a rectangular cabinet. A narrow service door stood beyond them, drawn with an arc opposite the direction the current door appeared to swing. Drew leaned over the stanchion rope. Both pencils were behind their ear again. "That's not how the passage is laid out now." "When did it change?" Armand asked. Drew glanced at Cass. Cass said, "Answer what you know. Don't borrow certainty from me." "The hose cabinet was removed before I ever worked here. The lift got boarded over. Someone reframed the exterior door so it swings out, but the threshold stayed. That's why the latch binds when the frame settles." Meg looked from the drawing to the service passage entrance. "And the route from the upper floors?" "Partly closed behind drywall, but roommate's linen closet backs onto the old drop." Drew traced the dotted line in the air rather than touch the paper. "If the shaft enclosure continues, there's probably a chase behind those shelves." Rena opened her tablet to the roommate inventory photographs. The sealed linen closet had an unusually shallow back. A vertical seam divided its painted paneling. "We thought it was a repair," she said. Might be an access panel nobody uses." Drew moved one pencil to the other side of their head. "Buildings keep old roots after people stop naming them." The sentence shifted the plan in Meg's mind. The towel had come from room 8, but not necessarily down the guest stair. A person who knew the old service system could move linen or remove it without crossing the lobby. "Can we look?" she asked. "Not today," the inspector said. "Room 8 is adjacent to the closed west section, and the access panel may open into a shaft. I want shoring locations and a confined space assessment first." Meg wrote the requirements down. Murder had not simplified the permit process. Rude, but appropriate. "What does the old shaft do to a 6-room occupancy plan?" she asked. The inspector looked pleased. "Either return to a danger governed by published rules. Depends on the fire stops. If the chase is continuous from basement to 3rd floor, it can carry smoke past every separation you think you have. We inspect each accessible opening, camera the closed runs, and seal them to current code. Without reopening the lift? You are not reopening that lift while I hold public office." Rena added shaft camera, fire stop scope, room 8 panel to the renovation list. "Can rooms 1 through 6 still be considered separately from the west section? If the barriers are continuous and the east stair qualifies after repair. The homicide scene does not decide your occupancy case. The physical conditions do." It was the first useful sentence Meg had heard about reopening in 2 days. Not permission, a path narrow enough to price. The inspector translated the path into inspections rather than optimism. A camera survey would begin at the basement shaft wall and rise floor by floor. Any open chase required mineral wool fire blocking and rated sealant. Roommate's panel could not be opened until the west shoring engineer identified a safe standing zone. "What can happen now?" Meg asked. "Rooms 1 through 4 can receive non-invasive electrical checks. 5 and 6 need the east stair lighting complete first. Door closers and smoke devices can be priced. No wall opening, no guest furniture, no finish work that conceals a condition we still need to see." Rena divided the renovation board into released, supervised, and held. Most work landed in the second column. "Supervised costs more," Meg said. "So does repeating contaminated work," the inspector replied. Meg requested written assumptions for every estimate. If a contractor priced ceiling 5 shaft openings, the bid needed to say 5. If the camera found 8, the change should be visible rather than presented as an unavoidable surprise. "You have had contractor trouble," the inspector said. "I inherited contractor trouble. I would like future trouble itemized." The inspector gave her the first unqualified smile of the morning. "That is a reasonable owner request." Reasonable did not mean inexpensive. It did mean the building's future could be divided into choices smaller than sale or collapse. Northmark's offer remained suspended, not necessarily dead. 6 guest room keys waited, where Rena had cleaned them before Dorian's body made ordinary work feel indecent. The inn could be evidence and still be a building. It could be damaged and not uniformly lost. "Put the scope in writing," she said. "I know. I need practice asking before someone tells me the answer is inevitable." The inspector glanced toward the contractor files stacked behind the desk. Also useful in construction. They moved to the kitchen with a copy of the ground floor plan, while the original remained under Patel's camera. The accessible portion of the old linen route began beside the pantry, crossed behind the plywood lift cover, and narrowed at the radiator before reaching the exterior door. Drew measured the wall hose outline. 2 empty screw holes formed its upper corners. Below, the hooks that had held the brass couplings sat bare beneath evidence labels. The coupling from the top hook was newer, Meg said. Could it have come from this system and still look new? Not if it lived here, Drew replied. Lake air, laundry humidity, bare brass. It should have tarnished like the lower one, unless somebody polished it. County found it scrubbed. Drew's lips pressed together. Cass opened a photocopy of the March and Micah transaction. Same size, same cast brass standard, bought Thursday at 8:12. We knew that. We knew what Marlowe bought, Armand said. We did not know which physical location required that exact standard. The inspector pointed to the plan. The original system does. Dutton Road may also. You need job records. Obtained this morning, Armand said. The Dutton Road owners have no fire hose fittings. Their work order was for a 1/2-inch washing machine valve. They paid by card, 2 days before Mr. Fitch purchased the coupling. Drew went pale beneath their freckles. He told me it was Dutton Road, they said. When? Armand asked. Thursday morning, at the supplier. Cass turned. You were there? Drew aligned their pencils against a seam in the counter. I picked up PEX clamps for you. He was at the old fixture bins. I asked what still used that size, and he said Dutton Road. Why did you not tell me? Because you asked whether I knew who picked up the receipt. I didn't. Kelda did. You knew who had the part. I saw him with a paper bag. I didn't open it. Armand's voice stayed neutral. Did he say anything else? Drew stared at the 2 empty hooks. He asked whether the boathouse line was still dead. I said I thought so. He said the controller had been unreliable all winter, and not to trust the memory. The room narrowed around the statement. You restored that circuit Wednesday night, she said. At 7:18, Marlowe called and said the owner wanted lower power for an inspection. I used the remote controller because I was at Cass's job in Chester. Sylvia was dead, Rena said. Meg had not authorized it. Drew's face closed exactly as it had when Meg questioned them beside the coupling. Defensive, ashamed, and frightened of what one minor choice might now carry. I knew he still handled emergencies here, they said. He had the access code. I did what I'd done before. Cass's voice sharpened. You energized a closed outbuilding on a contractor's verbal request? The line tested clear. The controller showed no fault. That is not authorization. I know. You know now. Drew took the pencils down and held them too tightly. I was trying not to slow the job. Marlowe always said people who needed every instruction written twice didn't last. The old lesson stood between them. Speed as competence, obedience as trust, documentation as insult. Meg had seen it in disaster offices after contractors moved equipment before approval and expected necessity to erase the paper trail. What did he tell you about the coupling? Armand asked. Drew swallowed. That an old one had cracked when he pulled it from a job and he was replacing stock before anyone complained. I assumed he meant the Dutton Road fitting. Did he say he had installed the replacement? No, I supplied that part in my head. Because it fit what you knew about him, Meg said. Because I wanted it to. Drew's answer came quickly this time. He taught me not to leave a bin short. When I saw the bag, I thought it proved he still did that. An explanation could be false without beginning as a lie. Sometimes another person built it for you from the materials you most wanted to use. She also saw the difference between Drew's admission and Marlowe's certainty. Drew supplied the detail that made them look careless. Marlowe supplied explanations that made his version of the work sound inevitable. Neither difference proved who had crossed the service passage after dark. The controller record gave us the real time, Meg said. After my bad decision put the time there. Both statements can be true. The phrase sounded like an "es," but no less useful for that. Your mistake is not improved by turning it into someone else's crime. Armand watched Meg for a moment, then returned to Drew. I need a formal statement about the call, the supplier, and every prior time Mr. Fitch used that code through you. Am I in trouble? You may have code, licensing, and employment consequences. I will not bargain those against your statement. Cass exhaled through her nose. They will have employment consequences after they tell the truth, not before. Drew looked at her. You made one dangerous choice, Cass said. Do not protect it with a second. They nodded. While Patel arranged the interview in the dining room, Rena and Meg continued comparing the plan with visible walls under the inspector's supervision. The dotted linen route explained the tight turn beside the radiator. It also showed a maintenance recess opposite the wall hose cabinet, now concealed by shallow shelves. A cart could wait there without blocking the passage, Rena said, and a person in the kitchen would not see it. The inspector measured the shelving depth. Modern studs over old masonry, added within the last 20 years. Marlowe had worked at Ashworth House for 18 months. Sylvia had known the route for a lifetime. Bernadette had used the back stair. The diagram expanded access without distributing knowledge equally. Meg returned to the manual. The linen route foldout had been repaired along one crease with translucent drafting tape. Sylvia's inventory gave no reason for the repair, and no record that anyone had borrowed the volume. Rena refolded the panel along its established creases, stopping each time for Patel's camera. If Sylvia used this to argue with Marlowe's measurements, he knew the manual existed. So did Bernadette, Meg said. The letter was addressed to her. And anyone who saw the service record shelf. The map offered knowledge, not custody. Meg closed the cover only after Patel recorded the final page count. The manual returned to the cabinet inside a clear archival bag, with a new evidence access seal across the door. Armand came out of the dining room holding his phone. Drew remained inside with Patel and Cass. He waited until the inspector had stepped into the lobby before speaking. County finished the preliminary surface analysis on the recovered coupling. Meg looked at the empty upper hook. Preliminary means not a final report. Correct. No usable prints. The exterior was cleaned with a chlorinated product, consistent with commercial laundry sanitizer. Rena's gaze shifted toward the linen room shelves. That could be normal in this passage, Meg said. On the exterior, yes. The threads are different. The old hose line was dry and capped years ago, but analysts found fresh diluted cleaner inside the thread channels. It was applied after mineral scale had been disturbed. Someone unscrewed it, Rena said. Cleaned it. Put it back. That is the current interpretation. And bought a matching replacement the next morning, Meg said. Armand did not confirm what the evidence had not yet proved. He looked through the service doorway instead, following the route the building had preserved after everyone else forgot its name. A building keeps receipts, he said. Some are made of paper, some are made of residue. Chapter 11. The Dunnet Municipal Hearing Room had been designed for 12 chairs, one folding table, and the belief that public interest would remain modest. By 6 o'clock on Monday evening, 29 people had arranged themselves within it. 4 stood along the back wall beneath a notice prohibiting standing. Lake Association members occupied the left side. Historical room volunteers occupied the right. Bernadette sat precisely between them, where neither group could claim her. Meg took a seat at the folding table beside Rena and placed 3 binders in front of her. Occupancy documents, structural records, and facts she was legally permitted to discuss. Armand had reviewed the 3rd binder that afternoon. Its useful contents fit on 2 pages. The public notice listed the matter as Ashworth House, temporary occupancy review and safety status. It did not mention homicide. This omission had not prevented anyone in Dunnet from understanding why the room was full. At the opposite end of the table, Celeste Rusk set down her cobalt notebook. Marlowe Fitch sat beside her without acknowledging that they had arrived separately and chosen adjacent chairs. The 3-person review board entered through the records office door. Stell Voyer followed with the hearing file and took the clerk's seat. She did not look at Inez in the audience. This is an administrative safety review, the board chair said after calling the meeting to order. It is not a forum for discussing the investigation into Mr. Pritchard's death. Statements that compromise that investigation will be stopped. Half the audience looked disappointed. The town inspector summarized the inn's condition. West wing sealed, service corridor restricted, boathouse closed, east stair repairs incomplete, 6 rooms potentially separable after fire stop verification. Her voice gave every defect the same calm weight, whether it concerned a door closer or a compromised joist. The owner has requested that the prior occupancy application remain pending rather than be denied, she concluded. I support that request, provided no guest occupancy occurs and all investigative holds remain controlling. The chair looked at Meg. Miss Ashworth, is the estate prepared to accept those conditions? Yes. Do you intend to reopen? Every face in the room turned toward her. I intend to determine what can be reopened safely, what it will cost, and whether the inn can support the work, Meg said. I have not made a final operating decision. Bernadette shifted in her chair. Someone near the back whispered, "Sell it," with the confidence of a person not responsible for the roof. The board chair moved to utility safety. The inspection file contains 2 different restoration times for the boathouse electrical circuit on April 29th. The handwritten equipment log records 6:15 p.m. The controller history records 7:18, which is correct. Rena went still beside her. Armand had warned that the discrepancy might surface. A safety board could not evaluate electrical controls while pretending its own records agreed. The controller history is a time-stamped electronic record, Meg said. The handwritten entry appears to have been added later. Conversation broke across the room. The chair struck the table once with the wooden handle of a date stamp because Dunnett had no gavel. By whom? I cannot answer that. Cannot or will not. Both. I do not know who wrote it, and the document is part of an active investigation. Stell lifted the hearing exhibit. The paper log sat inside a clear sleeve. Its last line read, "Boathouse, on 6:15, test OK," in dark blue ink. Celeste raised one hand. Northmark requests permission to clarify the controller's reliability. The discrepancy materially affects our suspended acquisition review. The chair looked at Meg, then the town attorney. The attorney nodded. Briefly, the chair said. Celeste stood. Her camel coat had been replaced by a navy suit, but the cobalt notebook remained in her hand. During due diligence, our consultants were told the controller loses stored time after a power interruption. If the unit reset, 7:18 could reflect restoration of the controller itself, rather than the circuit. Which consultant? Meg asked. The chair said, questions through the board. Meg folded her hands. Please ask which consultant supplied that information. Celeste answered before the chair could. Mr. Fitch has serviced the property for 18 months. Marlowe leaned toward the table microphone. That model is unreliable. Sylvia complained about it all winter. Drew sat in the second row beside Cass Vachon. Their shoulders rose, but they did not speak. The inspector opened her equipment report. The controller did not lose time. Its internal clock agrees with the network log within 41 seconds. The event record shows a remote command at 7:18. Marlowe shook his head. You can make electronics say what you want after the fact. You can misunderstand electronics after the fact, the inspector replied. The data was preserved by the police and reviewed by the manufacturer. A small sound traveled through the audience. Not laughter exactly, but its administrative cousin. Celeste did not sit. Even if the electronic record is accurate, someone may have entered 6:15 based on when the request was made, rather than when the switching occurred. Meg looked at the paper log. Celeste held her notebook open beneath one hand. The ink on its newest page was the same saturated cobalt as the disputed line. Rena noticed at the same moment. She touched one finger to the margin of Meg's binder, their agreed signal for observe, do not perform. Blue ink was sold in every office supply store. Color did not become identity because a suspect preferred it. The chair said, Ms. Rusk, did you make the handwritten entry? Celeste's expression conveyed courteous surprise. No. Did you enter the utility room on April 29th? I entered areas made available for site assessment. That is not an answer. I do not recall entering that specific room. Stell looked up from the minutes. Her fingers did not pause on the keyboard. The chair turned to Marlowe. Did you make the entry? No. Did you ask someone else to? The two denials landed too neatly beside one another. Meg opened her approved binder. The estate's photograph from 9/16 Wednesday morning shows no restoration entry beneath the November shutoff. A police photograph from Thursday morning shows the 6:15 entry. Whoever wrote it did so between those images. The town attorney leaned toward the chair. They conferred without covering the microphone, producing a low public murmur about evidence custody and administrative use. Bernadette raised her hand. Public comment comes later, the chair said. I am an interested estate claimant. That remains public comment with a longer future filing. Bernadette lowered her hand in a way that promised the future filing would be substantial. The chair addressed Meg. Why was the equipment room not secured by the estate? There it was, the question whose honest answer damaged her application. Because I did not know the paper record had been altered until the controller history was reviewed, Meg said. The room was part of a working inspection route on Wednesday. After the death was discovered, police controlled access as their scene assessment required.
Could unauthorized access have affected other safety records?
Yes. Rena turned her head slightly. They had discussed a narrower answer. Meg had rejected it. The chair's pen stopped. Which records? We are auditing breaker logs, contractor worksheets, key registers, and service access records. I cannot certify their completeness yet. The audience quieted. A closed inn with uncertain books was more alarming to a permit board than a dramatic accusation. Buildings reopened on records. Insurance paid on records. Firefighters relied on records. Marlowe said, "This is exactly why Northmark is the responsible path. The estate cannot verify its own systems." Meg turned toward him. The estate identified the discrepancies and disclosed them. After a man died. You serviced the systems before he died. The chair struck the date stamp again. No cross-examination. Marlowe sat back, satisfied that the interruption had equalized them. Public comment began. Laura Vachon asked the board to distinguish neglect from historic fabric. A Lake Association member asked whether the boathouse closure affected emergency water access. Inez stated that it did not, then sat before anyone could ask about grants. A neighbor opposed reopening until the service road was gated. Bernadette said the estate should not be allowed to make irreversible changes while her claim remained unresolved. Rena spoke only when the board asked about operational controls. She described the new key log, dual custody records cabinet, room-by-room hazard list, and written contractor authorization requirement. Who is responsible for maintaining those systems? The chair asked. At present, I am under a documented short-term engagement, Rena said. Longer authority has not been agreed. Meg heard the boundary and was grateful for it. The board's second member, a retired electrician named Thom Beaudry, turned to the repair estimate. You show emergency work only. Door closers, smoke detection, east stair lighting, fire stops, shaft inspection, no finishes. Correct, Meg said. No dining room restoration, no west wing rooms, no dock. Correct. Can the estate fund the safety work without relying on guest revenue it is not permitted to earn? This was the question Northmark had designed its deadline to answer for her. For the first scope, yes, Meg said. After that, I need verified estimates and an operating forecast. Celeste opened her notebook. Northmark's offer would fund complete stabilization without placing the estate at risk. Northmark suspended its offer, Meg said, pending disclosure, and reduced it before suspension based on structural information the estate believes may be unreliable. Marlowe reached for the microphone. The chair raised one finger, and he withdrew his hand. Thom studied the estimate. Ms. Ashworth, if rooms 1 through 6 cost more than projected, what happens? I stop. I do not move guests into unsafe rooms to make the next repair payment. And if the inn cannot support 6 rooms? Behind her, Bernadette waited for the answer. Then I decide with real numbers whether to sell, preserve another use, or close it properly. I will not pretend reopening is inevitable. Marlowe shifted. The word had reached him. Nor, Meg added, will I pretend demolition or sale is inevitable, because the person paid to describe the damage says so. The chair struck the date stamp before Marlowe could respond, but the sentence remained in the room. Stell called a 5-minute recess so the attorney could review the new exhibits. The audience compressed into the corridor, where a vending machine offered crackers from a year no one could verify. Bernadette cornered Meg beside the drinking fountain. You told them the estate can fund repairs, she said, yet you won't acknowledge what the estate owes me. Those are separate obligations. Separate is your new word for delay. Separate is how I avoid paying a contractor with money that may be wages, or paying a wage claim with money needed to keep the roof from injuring someone. Bernadette's amber glasses reflected the fluorescent light. Sylvia would have fixed the roof and owed me at the same time. That is how we arrived here. The answer hurt her. Meg saw it and did not retract it. I will preserve your timesheets, she said. The estate attorney will evaluate them. That is what I can promise. Bernadette looked past her toward the hearing room. You make every human thing sound like a file. Files are how human things survive people who change their minds. Stell opened the door and called them back before Bernadette could answer. After 40 minutes of deliberation in the records office, the board returned. The chair read from a single page. The application is continued, not denied. No guest occupancy is permitted. The estate may perform investigation-compatible stabilization and scoped repairs. Review will resume when the building inspector certifies fire separation for rooms 1 through 6. The police release relevant utility areas, and the estate submits a reconciled safety record audit. Not denial, not permission. Time converted into cost. The chair added deadlines. 10 business days for the first audit. Written authorization before any contractor entered a restricted route. Daily logs for temporary heat and power. The conditions filled half a page. Rena requested a copy before the meeting formally adjourned. Meg calculated while people put on coats. 10 days meant paying for supervised access, duplicate inspections, and repairs that might later be removed. It also meant the board had named a route back, instead of closing the file. She had spent much of Conrad's illness learning that a path could be burdensome and still be a gift. Outside, the April night had sharpened. People separated into groups beneath the town hall lamps. Celeste crossed the walk, with Marlowe half a step behind her. Meg said, "Ms. Rusk." Celeste stopped. "Your pen," Meg said. "May I see the brand?" Rena closed her eyes briefly. Celeste looked down at the cobalt notebook. "No. Because it is private? Because you are attempting to manufacture forensic theater from stationery. The log ink matches the color you use. So do 6 pens on the clerk's counter." Celeste stepped closer. "You disclosed uncertainty tonight because you want the town to admire your honesty. The board heard only uncertainty. What did you hear? An owner without a plan." Marlowe opened the passenger door of Celeste's car. They had arrived separately. Armand came down the town hall steps before Meg could ask another question. His presence ended the exchange. Celeste got into the car, and Marlowe walked away only after closing her door. "Ink color is not proof," Armand said. "I know. Yet you asked for the pen. I wanted to see which objection she chose, and she chose the correct one." Armand watched Celeste's taillights turn toward the lake road. Her attorney has agreed to preserve the notebook. Rena joined them carrying the binders. "Was there a reason you waited until after Meg asked badly?" "The agreement came during the hearing. Then I retract half my criticism." He accepted this without visible gratitude. Meg looked back at the lit hearing room windows. "The application survives." "Yes," Rena said. "So do the repair bills." Armand put his phone away. County recovered an audio file from Dorian's phone. It begins at 5:42 Wednesday evening. Cold gathered at the open neck of Meg's coat. "What does it say?" "Some of it may be privileged or related to a second client. I need authorization before I play those portions." He looked toward the dark line of the lake beyond the buildings. "But the background sound is from inside a large resonant space. I need someone who knows which parts of Ashworth House sound like that." The permit meeting had ended with no room approved for guests. The inn was about to admit one more witness. Chapter 12. At 8 the next morning, Armand placed Dorian Pritchard's voice in the middle of the dining room table. The phone itself remained with county technicians. Armand used a department laptop disconnected from the inn's network, a small external speaker, and a copy of the audio approved for location identification. Dr. Kavita Menon attended by video from the regional clinic. An assistant state's attorney appeared in a second square, introduced herself, and explained the rules twice. Meg could identify environmental sounds. She could not repeat client information outside the room, infer facts from redacted sections, or treat an enhanced audio impression as a recognized voice. "I understand," Meg said. Rena sat beside her with a blank timeline. "I understand." The attorney looked at Armand. "Stop playback if either witness begins speculating." "That will require vigilance," he said. Meg chose to regard this as general preparedness. Rain brushed the dining room windows. The inn answered with its morning noises, a radiator tick, a soft pipe knock in the wall, and the faint contraction of floorboards as Zone 1 warmed. Armand waited until all of them had heard the room before he started the file. For 6 seconds there was only movement. Fabric rasped near the microphone. A shoe struck something hollow. Dorian breathed once, close and irritated. Then his voice. "Wednesday, April 29th. Supplemental note. West Support Examination." The recording carried a thin metallic hum beneath the words. Meg had remembered Dorian as exacting, impatient, and dryly pleased when a fact resisted someone else's explanation. The recording restored the smaller things memory had already begun flattening. The slight catch before supplemental. The way he breathed through his nose when reading his own notes. The rasp of his coat collar against the phone. He had sat in her kitchen and refused coffee because caffeine made his handwriting worse. He had corrected her use of collapse when deflection was the accurate term. She had treated him as an expensive obstacle until he became a body in an orange shell. Now the room had to reduce his last minutes to sounds that could be labeled. Dr. Menon caught the hesitation in Meg's face. We can pause. No, Meg folded her hands under the table. But I understand why you asked. Armand did not restart immediately. The file was created on Dorian's phone at 5:42 and uploaded in fragments as signal allowed. County verified the device clock against the network. The first fragment is complete. Later data may have been interrupted when the phone was damaged. So 5:42 is reliable? Rena asked. Within seconds. The length of the recovered sequence is not necessarily the full recording. Rena wrote known start, incomplete end. The distinction occupied 4 words and prevented an entire false timeline. Armand paused it. Location? Not this room, Meg said. The dining room absorbs more sound. Rugs, curtains, upholstered chairs. Kitchen? Rena asked. Meg listened again. The hum continued, joined by 2 quick impacts. A low clunk followed half a beat later by a sharper one. She felt the sound before she placed it. Service elevator. Armand did not write. The cage is disabled, but the counterweight chain still moves when the building shifts or a door farther up is disturbed. It hits the lower stop twice, heavy, then light. It did it our first morning. Rena and I were in the passage. Rena opened the property condition video from April 29th. At 8:43 a.m., their voices faded behind the camera. The same double clunk sounded through the phone microphone. Armand played both clips in sequence. The match was not musical. It was mechanical. Wait, pause, metal. Could the sound carry elsewhere, he asked. Into the kitchen, possibly? Faintly into the back stair, strongest beside the boarded lift. He marked the ground floor plan with 3 concentric areas, rather than a single point. Playback resumed. Dorian said, upper face shows weathering consistent with the prior report. Lower notch is. The next 7 seconds had been muted. A gray bar moved across the laptop screen. When sound returned, paper crackled. Fresh cut, Dorian said. Blue layout line remains visible. This does not correspond to ordinary checking or historic. A pipe struck twice behind him. Meg lifted one hand. Armand paused. Radiator, she said. There are 23. That one knocks in pairs when zone 1 reaches pressure. The passage radiator is the end of the branch. It gets a hard first strike, a quieter second, then a hiss at the valve. They played the section again. Strike, strike, a breath of steam. Rena pulled up the plumbing map Cass had corrected after the burst line. Kitchen and service passage share the end branch. Dining room is a separate loop. Can we reproduce it? Armand asked. With the inspector present and nobody inside the restricted corridor, Meg said, we can record from the kitchen boundary while the boiler cycles. He added it to the evidence request, rather than turning the morning into an experiment. Dorian's voice continued, lower now. Photographs back to secondary storage. Preliminary conclusion withheld, pending comparison. Conflict issue. Second client has material connection to. The audio muted again. Celeste had hired him through a shell client. Meg could hear the missing words in the shape of the silence, without knowing what they were. She looked at the attorney square and said nothing. The audio returned with a small, bright note. Rena's pencil stopped. Bell, Meg said. Which bell? Armand asked. Front desk. Brass handbell, 1 strike. That is 2 rooms and a corridor away. The service door into the kitchen was open in our Wednesday photographs. The swinging door between the kitchen and lobby does not close fully. If both were open, the sound would travel along the hard surfaces. Could it be another bell? Yes. Rena checked the inventory. But there are no other bells documented in the occupied part of the building. The dinner bell is boxed in east storage. The exterior bell pull is disconnected. Documented does not mean non-existent, Meg said. Correct. Rena wrote likely desk bell, not exclusive. Armand played their first day video again. Celeste's arrival at 4:12 p.m. had been announced by the same clear note when she struck the brass bell with 1 finger. The audio waveform looked almost identical. Armand did not call it a match. Who was in the lobby at 5:42? He asked. Meg opened the day log. No one was supposed to be. I left for the lawyer's office at 4:50. Rena went to the laundromat and hardware store at 5:10. Returned at 6:02, Rena said. Receipts and traffic camera confirm most of the route. I believed he had left by 4. His rental car was still in the side lot, but I did not see it from the kitchen entrance. Marlowe? His truck came and went all day, Meg said. The last time I saw it was before I left. Celeste? She said she arrived at 6:40. Bernadette? Gone before 3. Inez? Home by 6:03 and her truck was east of town at 5:51. The bell did not identify the person who rang it. It established a line of open doors between the lobby and Dorian's microphone. Armand resumed playback. Dorian moved. A hollow scrape crossed the recording, followed by the squeak of a caster. Rena looked up. Laundry cart. Could be, Meg said. The front left wheel squeaks under side pressure. I logged it before County took the cart. The second cart also has a squeaking caster. Different pitch. Armand held up a hand. We will obtain exemplars. Continue. Dorian spoke more quietly. Need full section before conclusion. Fresh cut, compromised shoulder, blue line. Second client disclosure cannot wait. A door opened somewhere near the microphone. The change in air was audible. The hum widened. Rain hissed faintly, then narrowed as the door struck its frame without latching. Meg knew that refusal to close. Exterior linen door, she said. It rebounds if you do not lift the handle as you pull. Other doors? The pantry door drags but does not rebound. The kitchen entrance has a hydraulic closer. That sound is wood against the service threshold. A second voice entered the recording. One word at first, too blurred to understand. Then, you saw a cut in old wood. Dorian answered. I saw your chalk on a fresh surface. The speaker moved closer. Rain and fabric roughened the sound. The voice was male or low-pitched, but the distortion flattened the vowels. Old is old, the person said. No one pays you extra for inventing degrees. Rena's pencil hovered above the page. Recognition arrived before certainty. Marlowe had used the phrase at the front desk 2 days earlier while dismissing the joists, or something very close to it. Armand stopped the file. Do you recognize the speaker? The answer he needed was not the answer she wanted to give. No, Meg said. I recognize the phrase. From whom? Marlowe, in the lobby. He said old timber is old timber when Dorian challenged the joist damage. Rena searched the property video. The exchange had occurred beyond the camera's clear range, captured as voices under footsteps and a running faucet. She found it at 10:17 Wednesday morning. Dorian's recorded voice said, Age doesn't make a fresh cut old. Marlowe answered from the lobby, distant but distinct enough to hear the rhythm. Old timber is old timber. You don't get a new building by naming degrees of rot. Armand played the homicide file phrase again. Old is old. No one pays you extra for inventing degrees. Similar cadence. Not a clean voice identification. Could someone else repeat his language? The attorney asked. Yes, Meg said. He says things as if they are rules. People remember rules. Rena added, Celeste used his controller explanation at the hearing. That does not identify this speaker, Armand said. No. He looked at Meg. Did Mr. Fitch know the service door behavior? Yes. He lifted it automatically when he left Saturday. Bernadette also knew the back routes. Sylvia knew. Rena and I learned Wednesday. She called it an access door. I have never seen her operate it. Inez? No evidence she knew. Armand resumes the recording for its final seconds. Dorian said, You are done deciding what the owner gets to know. There was a movement close to the microphone, a hard impact against metal, and the sound of the phone skidding. Dr. Menon raised her hand from the screen. Stop, she said. Armand stopped. No one asked to hear it again. Rain filled the dining room. Meg looked at the blank place in the timeline after 5:42 and understood that it was not blank anymore. Dorian had been alive beside the service elevator. He had confronted someone about fresh cuts and a second client. The boathouse had come later. Rena turned to a new page. The towel and cart were both accessible from the passage within minutes. Room 8 linen could come down the old route if the panel opens. The exterior door reaches the service drive without crossing the lobby. We have not opened the room 8 panel, Meg said. Then mark it unverified. Rena did. She drew a line from 5:42 to 6:22, dividing it into what they knew and what they merely needed to test. Dorian begins recording at 5:42, she said. A second person is present before the recovered file ends. We don't use the impact sound to assign an exact death time. Dr. Menon nodded. Correct. The cart was photographed outside the linen room at 8:41 that morning. No staff shift moved it. At 6:02 when I returned, it was not visible from the kitchen entrance. Meg looked at her. You did not mention that before. I mentioned that I didn't see it. That is different from proving it wasn't there. The passage bends. Rena opened her laundromat receipt and hardware store receipt beside the timeline. I left the inn at 5:10. Highway camera catches my car southbound at 5:16. Laundromat payment is 5:28. Hardware checkout is 5:49. Northbound traffic camera is 5:56. I parked at 6:02. 7 minutes from the camera, Armand said. Normal with rain. I entered through the kitchen, set the bags on the pantry table, and went upstairs because I heard water in room 5's radiator. I did not enter the service passage. When did you next see the cart? Thursday after the burst pipe, uphill of the boathouse path, before County removed it. Meg added her own movements. I left at 4:50, arrived at the lawyer's office at 5:08, signed in at 5:10, left at 6:11, bought groceries at 6:26, and returned at 6:53. Your lawyer and store footage corroborate, Armand said. The inn had been empty of its temporary custodians for 52 minutes. Long enough for a private confrontation. Long enough for someone familiar with the service route to move without being asked why. Rena marked the earliest plausible cart movement after the recording. If the passage door was already open, the cart could reach the boathouse landing in under 6 minutes. Piers's loaded test took longer because we stopped to measure. Returning it empty would be faster. Tomorrow establishes the controlled times, Armand said. The roommate towel was sealed upstairs, Meg said. Someone either opened that closet earlier or used another access route. Rena added 2 branches, guest stair and old linen chase, unverified. And the bell? She asked. Meg looked through the open dining room doors to the front desk. Someone rang once while Dorian was recording. It may have been the person who entered. It may have been Dorian signaling from the passage. It may have been incidental. Would Sylvia have used 1 ring as a signal? Armand asked. 1 ring meant front desk. 2 meant kitchen help. 3 was family. Who knew that? Bernadette. Marlowe might after working here. Anyone Sylvia trained. But hearing 1 ring does not prove someone used the code. Armand added the bell to corroboration, not identity. Armand drew a line through boathouse primary scene on his working board. Beneath it, he wrote service passage 542+. County still has to establish the medical timeline and interpret the impact, he said. We have location evidence, not the complete act. But Dorian did not fall from the boathouse ladder, Meg said. Dr. Menon answered. His injuries were already inconsistent with a simple fall. This audio strengthens the conclusion that the scene was staged. My final report will state the medical basis, not the sound of a door. Separate systems, each holding its own weight. Armand closed the laptop, but left the speaker on the table. Tomorrow, under supervision, we test the service route, he said. Cart, timing, door acoustics, radiator, bell. No body equivalent load unless County approves the protocol. Piers should assess the landing, Meg said. Already asked. Drew should operate the controller. The inspector will decide. Rena capped her pencil. And Meg? Armand looked at her. Meg identifies the building. She does not chase the person inside it. The limitation no longer felt like exclusion, and felt like a roll with edges. Meg looked through the dining room doors toward the dark mouth of the service passage. For days, she had blamed the inn for concealing events because it was old, damaged, and full of routes no one properly recorded. Now its noises aligned. The lift chain, the radiator, the bell, the stubborn door. The building had not kept silent. You have reached the end of Part 1 of No Vacancy for Trouble. Return next Thursday for Part 2, beginning with Chapter 13.